of stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Canon Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Miller, and I'm so glad that you've decided to tune in to talk about our favorite thing in the world, yet again, Star Wars. Guys, I'm back. I've taken a hell of a break. I think the last time I did an episode of the Canon Podcast was May. I apologize for that. I do believe I have a decent reason for it. Maybe you guys won't lynch me too badly. I feel like I owe you guys an explanation. So back in May, as you guys know, I work at a grain elevator. Between May, June, and July, I usually take a break on the podcast because I'm moving into fall harvest, and harvest is when they need me the most. So I took my break between May and July. Well, fall harvest this year ended up starting almost immediately in August, and I ended up sliding right into fall harvest right after wheat harvest. And it just kept going, so I never really got a chance to get back on the mic. So in October, toward the end of October, Kirsty's mom had an accident. She fell at her home. They lived a half hour away. And she fell. Kirsty's dad's on the road a lot with his job, so he wasn't home, and nobody else was at the house to help Kirsty's mom. So we sat down and discussed it and decided that she would be moving in with us. Well, Kirsty's dad had the thought, which makes sense. Why am I paying for a house nobody is staying in? I'm on the road all the time. Why am I paying for a house that nobody's going to be living in? So he sold their house, and they moved in with us. Now, the room they took is the room that I used to use for the podcast. If you guys remember, I used to have my own bedroom. When Kirsty and I bought the house, I told her, you can have the entire house. I want one room. I want one room for me to put my Star Wars stuff up, for me to do my podcast, for me to make my content, where, my office, my area. And you guys remember that room. And as time went on, Kirsty ended up getting into some hobbies that she needed some workspace, so I told her, I'll split the room with you. So I split my one room with her, and we each took half. And then she ended up taking even more room, and I was like, all right, look, I'll just take the closet. It's a little 4x8 closet. I'll take the closet. And I turned it into a booth with the black and the blue panels and everything, and I used that for a little while. But then when October rolled around and her parents moved in, they took over that room. They needed the closet, so I tore my booth down, and I had nowhere to record any of my stuff. I had nowhere to make any content. I was bummed because making this content is kind of my out. I'm a very stressed person in real life. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but I'm a very stressed person, even more so now that my in-laws live under my roof. Not a bad thing, but they live here, and then now, Jensen is 2 years old now. But Kirsty and I are also sponsored foster parents through the state of Kansas now. So we've got a 10 and 12-year-old living with us also that we got out of the system right before Christmas. So it's very hectic in my household right now, and it's absolutely insane. As a matter of fact, they were being noisy a while ago when I told them I was going to come down and record, and they didn't know how to be quiet. Which they're 10 and 12, I get it. And Kirsty was like, I'm going to take them to town to get them some clothes and stuff that they need. I'm like, all right, you do that. That's cool. So I got a quiet house to record in for a little while. But before they moved in, we were talking about finishing my basement, because my basement, it was just this open concrete square, the same size as the house. And it was just untapped potential sitting there. So we decided we were going to finish it. And I started I said, if we do that, I want to build me an actual studio where I can come in, do the Star Wars Canon Podcast. Eventually, we'll get 1138 Talk Radio going, and where I can do my gaming videos and all this other stuff. A soundproof room where we can work, or where I can work on my stuff. And so that was the room I started with, is my room, because I wanted to get it going. And it's not finished yet. It looks good behind me, but In front of me, I can still see the studs on the wall. I haven't got anything up on the walls yet. No soundproofing. There's blankets hanging up behind me and stuff. But I got it operational for now. Eventually, we're going to finish it out, and it's going to be absolutely great. I can't wait. Kirsty's dad has been helping me put this together. This is his old tabletop. I mean, we've really put all this together. He bought me a Mac all-in-one so I could do some audio work on it. Very excited about it. But eventually, we're going to be doing the gaming videos and everything in here on the front of my desk here. This room goes, I mean, I think it's 15 feet long. So it goes out another 10 foot from here, and I'm going to have room to do my gaming videos. We're going to have a couch over there for if we ever have guests, and I'm going to have a TV on the other side of this desk where I can do my gaming videos, reaction videos. We can watch full episodes of stuff. Kirsty and I can come down. We're going to have some microphones over there. So we actually have a comfortable place to sit and do reaction videos and not, computer chairs. I've got some more equipment now for video capture because Disney Plus, for some reason, has set it up where if you have encoding software, you can't record anything on Disney Plus now. So I got some video capture equipment, which works. So we're going to be doing some full reaction videos for Patreon. We're going to be doing some edited ones for YouTube. So there's a lot coming down the pipeline. I'm very excited. I mentioned 1138 Talk Radio. We're working on putting together a radio show for everything geekdom, not just Star Wars, but we can talk about Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Ghostbusters, Doctor Who, video games, any TV show, Walking Dead, like anything at all that we can think of to talk about. Because, everybody that works on the Star Wars Canon Podcast and on the Marvel Cast podcast, we don't just love Star Wars and Marvel. We love all kinds of stuff, and we want to talk about more than just Star Wars and, Marvel. So we're doing 1138 Talk Radio as kind of an outlet for all of that stuff, so we can at least put our opinions out there, because we try to be positive here. We try to be very accepting of other people's opinions, because everybody has an opinion, and opinions aren't right or wrong. And we all disagree on stuff. If we all agreed on everything, what would we have to talk about? So we're going to try to bring that same attitude towards some other fandoms as well, and talk about some other things. JG and Steven have been doing an awesome job on the Marvelcast podcast. If you guys haven't checked that out, definitely head over there. They have been kicking ass on that show, and they're doing great. I mean, I couldn't be happier with them. So definitely head over there and check that out also. So 1138 Talk Radio, I'm not sure when we're going to get that going. We're in the process. I'm in the process of putting some stuff together for it, but we're going to get there eventually. So keep that in mind also. So with all of that out of the way, now that you guys know why I've been gone, where I've been, let's get into what this episode is going to be. This is episode 50 of the Canon Podcast. And every year about this time, actually, I'm pretty late. I'm almost a month late on it this year. I do a ranking video of the Star Wars novels that came out the year before. This year, I've decided to do things a little bit differently. Last year, when I did my rank video, I said that would be the last year I would do a full ranking list, because the list just gets longer every year. And then I would be doing that year's novels, ranking those, and then placing them on the main ranking wherever they fall. That's going out the window, because this year I need to go through them all again. Because I wasn't doing the podcast toward the second half of last year, basically, in all my free time that I did have, I decided to go back and reread some of these old canon novels that came out back in 2014, 2015. And I wanted to see if there was anything about them that stood out now that we've gotten a lot more canon material around some of the same time periods. See if anything was retconned, if anything really matched up really well, almost like it was planned. I wanted to see if there's anything like that. And I wanted to get a fresh perspective on some of these books, because some of them that came out early in the new canon were a little rough. A couple of them were a little rough. So I wanted to go back and kind of visit them again. And yes, I did reread Heir to the Jedi again, among several others. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. Oh God. But I wanted to see if maybe the ranking would change a little bit. Now that I'm older and a little bit different appreciation for books that I had even 6 years ago. And I wanted to see, if maybe anything rung a bell with me, and kind of anything that kind of stuck with me a little more the second time around that maybe I missed the first time. And upon doing so, I discovered something. So what I did was I read A New Dawn, and I was going to read them in the order they came out. So I started with A New Dawn. I reread it. Matter of fact, I read the first half of New Dawn in like 8 hours. I just sat and I couldn't, it was good. So I reread A New Dawn. I reread Tarkin. And then I was like, oh, do I want to reread it? Do I really want to reread Heir to the Jedi? I was like, all right, you know what? I'll sit down. We'll do it another one. We'll read it again, and we'll just see if it's as bad as I remember. I reread Lords of the Sith, and then I reread Dark Disciple. After that, I got to Aftermath, and I had this idea, instead of rereading Aftermath and then going into Lost Stars, which, I want to reread Lost Stars again, I decided to reread the Aftermath trilogy all back-to-back. So Aftermath, Life, Debt, and Empire's End. Because I wanted to see if it gave me a different perspective on reading an entire trilogy back-to-back, rather than reading a book, waiting 6 months, reading the second one, waiting 6 months, reading the third one. And I got to say, it's a big difference. It really does make the story kind of blend together a little bit, especially when you're so fresh off of, let's say you're in the third book, when you're so fresh off the first two, you can still remember everything that kind of went back. And so it does kind of change your perspective a little bit when you sit and read them all back to back like that, which I had never done in Star Wars canon before, because like I said, there's always 6 months in between these books, even for trilogies. So it made me think, instead of doing individual novels on the ranking list, if there's a trilogy, I'm just going to rank the whole trilogy. And my reasoning is, let's say you watch last year's ranking video. The first Aftermath book for me was pretty low on the list. And you go further down the list, then you find Empire's End and then Life Debt back to back. Life Debt higher than Empire's End. If you look at that list, you're going to go, oh, okay, so Empire's End and Life Debt are the best two novels of that. I'm going to read Life Debt because that's the best novel in the trilogy. Well, then you're not going to know any of these characters. You're not going to know their history. You're not going to know their interactions from the first Aftermath. And those three books are kind of an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So I'm decided to go back and re-rank them as a complete story, instead of you going back and rereading just one book of a trilogy, not knowing what's going on, because that might make you go, why is this book so good? Because I don't know anything that's going on. I'm just doing the entire trilogy. If you want to read Life Debt, you're going to have to read the first Aftermath to understand these characters, their histories, why Snap is so mad at his mother all the time, and everything like that. And the relationships between these characters. So I'm just going to rank them as trilogies. Some of the trilogies I'm ranked on here are not complete yet, because there's a good example, High Republic stuff. So the next phase of High Republic has already kicked off this month. I've already got all the books. I haven't started reading them yet, but it's already kicked off. And so the 3 Del Rey novels that came out are kind of a trilogy. The 3 young adult novels are kind of a trilogy, and the 3 young readers are kind of a trilogy that kind of supplement the Del Rey novels. But because this is the 2021 ranking, I'm not including those last books in those trilogies. So if the trilogy isn't finished, I've placed it on this list where it sits now, as it is, with the 2 books. And we'll talk a little bit about which ones have books still coming out this year. The Del Rey novels, there's The Fallen Star, which just came out, which I've got on my Kindle. I haven't started reading it yet. I'm so excited to read it. But I wanted to get this video out before I started reading the 2022 novels. So, with all of that being said, that's kind of the structure. That's why I wanted to go back and redo the entire list one more time. And, some of these trilogies that aren't finished yet, they may move next year when I do the video, depending on how good that last book is and the trilogy overall. As I reread some of these trilogies, Alphabet Squadron being a good example. If I reread, I'm going to, I shouldn't say if, but when I reread Alphabet Squadron, it may change on the list, reading them all back to back as one massive story instead of having a 6-month gap in between each book. So it's going to be a living list, I guess you could say. And we'll see how it goes as I reread some of these old novels again. But I'm going to start getting the novel reviews out as well as I'm rereading all of these. So start working on actual reviews again and try to pump some more content around the novels out as I'm rereading them. So let's get on with this list. It's a long list. We're already 15 minutes into this episode. This is going to be a long one. So I've got 52 items we're going to talk about tonight on this list. And I hope you guys have got a good drink. Sit back. Let's talk some Star Wars for the next couple of hours. So let's get into this. Number 52 on my list is going to shock some people because it is not what it used to be. The last item on my ranking list is not the same as it was last year. It is not Heir to the Jedi. It is the Alphabet Squadron trilogy by Alexander Freed. It is made up of Alphabet Squadron, Shadowfall, and Victory's Price. Before I go any further, I want to put a disclaimer. These are just my opinions. These are just me personally. This is how I saw the books. This is what they did for me. This is where they landed with me. This list may be completely backwards from yours. I may get through all of these and you might go, that is literally the opposite list for me, which is perfectly okay. But this is just my ranking. Kind of give, if you guys haven't read some of these books, maybe give you a little bit of an idea as to what the books are about and kind of judge what you can judge on your own whether this is something you want to read or not. So for me, personally, Alphabet Squadron is the last on my list. And it was a trilogy that I had a lot of hope for. When they first announced it, I was like, okay, we'll give it a shot. Yeah, why not? For me, the first book, when the first Alphabet Squadron book came out, I was reading it, and I was like, some of the names in the book were just, every time I had to stop and read a name, it took me out of the book a little bit, because I was like, God, some of these are hard to pronounce. And it kind of threw me off a little bit. But I remember thinking, this is just the first book in a trilogy. Let's see where it goes. Maybe I'll really enjoy the second two books like I did Aftermath. So then Shadowfall came out, and I was halfway through it, and I was like, okay, this sucks. This isn't doing it for me. I'm not into this story. I thought it was going to be a lot cooler than it was, and I couldn't get into it. And then I thought, oh my God, in 6 months, I still have another Alphabet Squadron book I have to sit and read. And when I bought it, I was like, oh God, here we go. I got to do this. I got to power through it. So it was a rough trilogy to finish. Granted, I didn't read them back to back like you will now. If you guys, if you've never read the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, all 3 books are out now. You guys can go sit and read them all back to back. So maybe it'll be a different experience for you. I'm hoping when I do that, it's a different experience for me. Maybe they'll move up on the list a little bit. But for right now, Alphabet Squadron is last on my list. This is a trilogy that takes place around the same time as Aftermath. So actually, I think it's running concurrently with Aftermath. Right after Return of the Jedi. And Harrison Dula is putting together a squadron called Alphabet Squadron. It's called Alphabet Squadron because there's an X-Wing, an A-Wing, a B-Wing, a Y-Wing, and a U-Wing. I think those are the 5. And it's kind of a stupid name for a squadron, but I get it. They're going up against Shadow Wing. They're tasked with trying to hunt down this elite TIE fighter force for the Empire called Shadow Wing. I shouldn't say some. There's one part in particular in the first book where somebody from Shadow Wing is interacting with somebody from Alphabet Squadron out in space on the comms, and it's kind of bone-chilling what they're talking about and what they're saying. But overall, I just don't feel like the story's really translated to books well. Now, that's just my opinion. If you guys, because I know Richard J., who's a friend of the podcast, he really enjoyed the Rogue Squadron series in the EU. And if you guys really like that series, I'm sure you're going to love Alphabet Squadron. Ends up getting really deep, and the second book is really kind of an Empire Strikes Back kind of feel to it. What happens with the squadron and Erica Quell, who's the main character in the trilogy, by the way, kind of what happens with her and where she goes off and does and stuff like that. So it may be something you might get into. Maybe, hell, I don't know. Maybe if I go back and reread these, maybe there's something I missed, and there's something that I really enjoy about them. But for right now, they're on the very bottom of my list. That's the current ranking here at the podcast. Number 52 is the Alphabet Squadron trilogy by Alexander Freed. Number 51 on my list is Heir to the Jedi by Kevin Hearn. It didn't move up very far, but it did move up. It has been dethroned as the worst book in canon, in my opinion. When I went to reread it, I was like, man, I don't know if I really want to reread this or not. And Kirsty's actually the one that convinced me to reread it. And before I tell you my opinion, if you haven't read Heir to the Jedi, it takes place pretty soon after A New Hope. It's a Luke Skywalker novel. He doesn't have anybody to train him as a Jedi for right now, so he's kind of on his own, and he's kind of depressed because he doesn't have anybody to talk to about his Force abilities or anything like that. And he's tasked with trying to capture this Imperial spy, or this, I should say, spy in the Empire, who's kind of defecting. And in order to do so, he's got to upgrade the ship that he's using that belongs to this pilot who he's trying to basically get laid by. Her father owns the ship, so they have to go on missions for him in order to upgrade the ship so that they can do this mission. And in the process, Akbar has tasked Luke with trying to scope out planets for hidden rebel bases. And it's a hard book to get through. It's not as bad. If you'd asked me a year ago, what did you think of Heir to the Jedi? I would have just went off and just pissed about how bad that book was. Now it's like, it's not the greatest, but I mean, if you want to read it, go for it. You're not missing nothing if you don't. It's still bad. It's just not, maybe I was a little harsh. Maybe Kevin Hearn needs another shot at writing Star Wars canon. That really hurt to say. But, maybe he just had a bad couple weeks writing this. I don't know. This book was supposed to be an EU novel, kind of got grandfathered in because it was in the process of being published already when the slate wipe happened. So it really wasn't meant to be in canon in the first place. But it kind of works. There's nothing in it that really retcons anything else. There's nothing that relates back to anything else in canon, really. So if you don't read this one, you're not going to miss anything. I promise you that. But yeah, it's not on the bottom of my list anymore. I'll go a little easier on it. Heir to the Jedi is number 51 on my list. Number 50 is Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older. Last Shot is a novel that came out around the time Solo: A Star Wars Story was released. This novel is a Han and Lando story, which sounds great on paper, but I think the execution was pretty lacking on this novel. This novel takes place a couple of years after the Aftermath trilogy, after the Battle of Jakku. So Ben Solo is born at this point. He's a toddler. And Han's kind of having a hard time connecting with him. But Lando shows up. Now, we're going to call the time period after Battle of Jakku as quote-unquote present day. So present day Han and Lando have this issue that's kind of haunting them from their pasts. Concerning this guy. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. Please forgive me. The villain of the story, which, for the record, was an awesome villain. He was taking, for example, he's taking Wookiees and adding droid parts to them and making them like cyborgs, like Frankenstein. Oh God, it was cool. But anyway, and the story, this novel has got time jumps in it, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. If done properly, it works. Kind of like with Thrawn Alliances, it really worked well, bouncing back and forth between Thrawn and Anakin and Thrawn and Vader. This story, I don't think did a good job doing it. It covers 3 different time periods. It's present day, and then it goes back in time to when Lando was young and he owned the Falcon, and kind of his experience with this villain. And then it also cuts back to when Han was young with the Falcon and kind of his experience with this villain. And when you're reading it, it doesn't give you any context which of those 3 time periods you're in at this point. You have to kind of keep reading and kind of figure it out on your own. It doesn't say, Han, Lando. It's hard. It's jarring back and forth. I just don't think it was executed well. It's a good story. And I think had he told it chronologically, or if he'd have told all the Lando stuff as a part 1, part 2 told all the Han stuff, and then part 3 went to present day and was all resolution, I think it would have been a kick-ass story. And the time jumps were just, it threw me off. It was hard for me to read, but there were some parts in it that were very enjoyable. There's one particular scene in it that just made me laugh out loud when I was reading, and it's toward the beginning of the book. Han Solo, they're on Coruscant, and Han comes into this office he's there to talk to a character from Aftermath. And the receptionist is a Gungan. And you guys know how I feel about Gungans, just death to all Gungans. And Han leans back and says to Lando, he's like, hang on, I'll talk to him. I know how to talk to these guys. And Han walks up to the Gungan and says, "Wisa here to see Bombad," and he just kind of goes on talking like Jar Jar. And the Gungan just stares at him, and he's just like, "That is so racist. That's so insulting. Not all of us talk like that." And so there's a couple of moments in it that are really funny. And then Han, I could just picture him doing his sheepish kind of like, oh, geez, like putting foot in mouth kind of moment. But overall, I wasn't a big fan of the story. I'll give it another shot. I'll go back and I haven't given Last Shot its last shot. I'll read it again. I can't promise it'll be this year, but I'll get to it eventually. But Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older is number 50 on my list. Number 49 is another Han Solo novel. It is Most Wanted by Ray Carson. This one also came out around the time of Solo: A Star Wars Story. This is a young adult reader. You can buzz through it in 5 or 6 hours probably. And this is the story of basically how Han and Kira, I don't want to say met, but how their relationship kind of turned into what it was at the beginning of Solo. Because at the beginning of this book, they hate each other. They're basically on the run from the droid Gatra, and shenanigans ensue. But I wasn't a huge fan of this particular novel. It was kind of hard to read. It was one of those where you're like halfway through and you're just like, Jesus, is this over yet? I actually contemplated on putting this one down and moving on. I don't remember what the next novel was out at the time, but I thought about moving on, and I didn't. I ended up finishing it. This isn't one that you really need to read in order to know what's going on in Solo. It has nothing to do with Solo, really, the film. But you guys might enjoy it. It was, honestly, for me, in my opinion, it was geared more towards teenage girls. And it was, for me, it was a rough read. So take that as you will. Most Wanted by Ray Carson is number 49 on my list. 48 I want to talk about for a second before I tell you what it is, because 48 isn't exactly a novel per se. It's got story to it, so I wanted to add it. But it's not actually like a novel proper. Number 48 on my list is Skywalker: A Family at War by Kristen Baver. I'm sorry if I'm butchering her name. And it's more of what's the word I should use? It's more of like an expose of the Skywalker family more than anything. It's kind of a recap of everything we already know from the beginning of episode 1 all the way to the end of episode 9 with the Skywalkers. And I thought maybe there would be like a nugget of information in there somewhere, like something we didn't know, like, oh, I didn't know that. No, there's nothing. But it was kind of interesting to go back through and kind of reread all of that. And it was, for me, it's not the bottom of the list because it's the Skywalkers. I mean, how much more badass do you get than the Skywalkers? So it's more of an expose. I don't want to say an autobiography. Expose, I think, is the best way. A documentary, maybe that's the way I should say it. It's a written documentary on the Skywalker saga, or on the Skywalker family. So it does, I take that back. It does give a little bit of history to like Padme, a couple of things I don't think we knew, but like I said, there's nothing in there that's really galaxy shattering or anything like that. So Skywalker: A Family at War is number 48 on my list. Number 47, trucking right along, is Crash of Fate by Zoraida Cordova. This is a Galaxy's Edge novel. This novel came out around the same time as Galaxy's Edge being opened at Disney World, and I can tell you right off the bat why this book is so low on my list. I'll tell you in a second. Crash of Fate is, I don't want to say a love story, but I guess it kind of is. It's kind of a tweeny love story. On Batuu, Black Spire Outpost, there's these two kids, boy and a girl, and they're best friends. And the girl ends up getting taken by her parents in the middle of the night, doesn't get to say goodbye to her friend, off planet, and gone. And so she never really got to say goodbye to him, never really, understood what was going on. Becomes a smuggler, comes back to Batuu, and runs back into said boy, and sparks fly, because now it's like, oh God, you grew up, like, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's there's a lot of sexual tension between these two in the book, and it was just, I don't know, it's just it not my cup of tea. You know what I mean? So it's a lot like Most Wanted, but just not with Han and Kira. It's these two. Doc Ondar's shop plays a main part in this story with a particular relic that's in there. So this might be one you guys get into. Maybe I need to go back and reread it. Now, the biggest reason I couldn't really get into this book, and I'll tell you guys this. When this book came out, remember, I read all these books as they come out. And at this particular point, when these books were coming out, every freaking book, every comic, everything, even Solo mentioned it. Even the Solo: A Star Wars Story, the movie, mentioned it. Black Spire, Batuu, Black Spire, Batuu. It was just, they were beating you over the head with, we get it. There's Disney World land called Galaxy's Edge and it's Batuu. I get it. Not everything has to be Batuu. Even the Thrawn Alliances even had a mention. It was just everything at the time was Batuu. And I was getting serious Galaxy's Edge fatigue just from all the storytelling that was coming out. I had just come off of Black Spire and reading that and then straight into this. And it was like, Jesus. And then there was the comic series, the 5 or 6 issue run of Galaxy's Edge, where that was hard for me to get through. And it was just, at the time, I was just so fatigued with it. So I wasn't that big into the whole Batuu thing. So I shouldn't say that. Maybe that's the main reason that I couldn't get into this book. Going back and rereading it now may be different. We'll see. So A Crash of Fate is number 47 on my list. 46 is Force Collector by Kevin Shinick. I think that's how you pronounce your name. Force Collector. Force Collector is a book that I was kind of intrigued by. And kind of like Last Shot, I don't think the execution was very well on it. And I've talked to people who really did enjoy this book. This book takes place right around, I want to say before The Force Awakens. It's got to be somewhere between the Phantom Limb comic and The Force Awakens, and I'll explain why in a minute, how I know that. But it's got to be somewhere between those two. Force Collector is about this kid who finds out his grandfather was a Jedi, and he starts to develop this ability. It's Force psychometry. Quinlan Voss has it, where you touch an object and you see the history of that object. You kind of experience what it experienced. And so he has this ability. He doesn't know how to control it. He has to wear gloves all the time because everything he touches just flash, flash, flash. And he ends up running away and starts collecting all these different artifacts. And some of the artifacts are kind of cool that he came across. The Falcon itself is in this story, the training remote that Luke used. Shiru Emway's walking stick is in this story, which I'm not entirely sure how he got, considering it was blown up on Scarif in Rogue One. So I'm not entirely sure how he got that. But the one artifact in particular, and this is how I know it's between the 3PO comic and this, he ends up on Takodana at one point, and he's talking to Maz Kanata. And this is the other reason why I can't really take this book seriously. And he's telling Maz Kanata about his ability, and, she knows all things Force, that. And she's like, hang on a second, I have something for you to touch. And she comes back with a golden protocol droid arm. How she got this thing, I have no idea. We all know whose arm it is. No idea how she got this thing, because the last I saw, I think it was getting sucked into a swamp by a creature. And he touches it, and he becomes basically the first person in Star Wars to watch Star Wars. Because 3PO was there for everything, so he saw everything 3PO experienced. He experienced episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and Rogue One, all of it, there, cut and dry. I don't want to say it was like a break in the fourth wall kind of thing, because the way they did it in the story kind of made sense with the Force abilities and everything. But for us who have sit and watched the trilogies and the saga, for us, it was like he just watched Star Wars. That's literally what he just did. So it was like one of those, okay, I get it. Okay, move on. So Force Collector was kind of neat. There's a couple of I don't want to say nostalgic, fan moments in there, fan service moments, but they're few and far between. There's a lot of reading in between the cool parts. So Force Collector is number 46 on my list. Number 45 is a trilogy, and it is the classic trilogy novelizations. I guess the young adult versions of them. A New Hope, The Princess, The Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy by Alexander Bracken. Empire Strikes Back, So You Want to Be a Jedi by Adam Gidwitz. And Return of the Jedi, Beware the Power of the Dark Side by Tom Engelberger. These were definitely geared towards young readers, maybe a couple of them younger than maybe some others. The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy is broken up into three parts. The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy. Leia, Han, and Luke. Each third of the book is told from their point of view. And this one adds a little bit of neat information to the canon, I guess you could say. Leia's interrogation scene on the Death Star is in detail in this book. Luke kind of doing the training simulators with Wedge before they attack on the Death Star. Stuff like that is in that one. So it's honestly, that's the most tolerable for me out of all three of them. It's not a bad little read. So You Want to Be a Jedi is the hardest one to get through. It's the hardest one to take seriously. It tells the story like you are Luke Skywalker experiencing everything. It says you turn around and you see a wampa. Oh, stuff like that. They don't add the in the book. I don't even know how you'd spell it. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. They tell the story like you're Luke Skywalker experiencing these events as they go. And at the end of each chapter, there's a little like lesson on how to be a Jedi, how to meditate, and how to close your eyes and just, So that one's kind of the most childish out of all of them. Beware the Power of the Dark Side is kind of somewhere in between the other two. As far as tone goes, I think the very first line of the book is 2 droids in the desert. Don't worry, the story's not that boring. It gets better. And it's like, okay, I get it. It's kind of a break in the fourth wall kind of thing, talking directly to you, the reader. It does have a neat little reference of like Ezra Bridger in it and some other things, but they're really just the novelizations of the classic trilogy. So if you want to relive them, they're not bad. Definitely not very top of my list for me, obviously, but they're on the list. Obviously, they're canon, but they're not bad. You're not going to rip your hair out trying to read them. So they are number 45. Number 44 is Spark of the Resistance. I don't remember if it's Spark of Resistance or Spark of the Resistance. My notes say Spark of Resistance by Justina Ireland. This is a novel that takes place between episodes 8 and 9. It's a Rey story more than anything. Basically, Rey's on the Falcon, and they get a distress call from another planet. She takes the Falcon and Chewie and Finn and Poe and Rose, and they go to this planet and try to help these people because there's a First Order outpost, an old Imperial outpost on this planet. This book is one of those little 3-hour read, short, young adult things, kind of like Smuggler's Run, Moving Target, Weapon of a Jedi, and stuff like that. But it's a Rey story. And, when you watch the trailer and even the film for Rise of Skywalker, Rey says it in the film too, how she says, everybody keeps saying they know who I am. I'm afraid nobody does. I don't even know if I know who I am. There's a lot that kind of lends itself towards that line in this book. The leader of this people they're trying to help is like, we know you, you're a Jedi. And she's just like, you know me? And, he's like through the Force. And so it kind of lends itself to that a little bit. And it's all right. The story itself is very unremarkable. By the time it was over, I was like, okay, well, that one's done. Put it on the shelf, move on to the next one. It wasn't one to sit and talk to everybody about. Wasn't one that I even really recall every detail of, to be honest. It was Justina Ireland's first venture into Star Wars canon. And it left, I don't want to say a bad enough taste, but it left a taste in my mouth. I'm going to say it bad enough that now she's working on a lot of High Republic stuff, and it's not bad, but every time I see her name attached to something, I'm just like, ugh, crap. And it's nothing against Justina Ireland. It's just for some reason that first impression of her was Spark of the Resistance, and it's like, oh crap. Okay, so now we're trying to rewrite that with some of the High Republic stuff. So Spark of Resistance is number 44 on my list. Number 43 on my list is on here because it is now in book form. It's Dr. Aphra. Dr. Aphra started as this particular title of Dr. Aphra started as a radio drama, or not a radio drama, but an audio drama, kind of like Dooku Jedi Lost. And unlike Dooku Jedi Lost, I actually listened to the audio version of this first and absolutely loved it. The reason it's so low on the list, though, is because it's a recap of the first Vader run of comics where she popped up in issue 2 and went to issue 25. It's all of that from her point of view. So it's not a whole lot of new stuff there, but the fact that you got to hear BT and 000 go back and forth and bicker, and you hear Black Chrysanthemum in the background roaring, and you actually hearing Dr. Aphra, I don't remember her name, but whoever they got to voice Dr. Aphra in this book nailed Aphra. Like, she got her down. And, it was kind of cool to see things from her, kind of from her mentality, from her point of view. And I got to go back to hearing BT and 000 bickering. It was so much fun. It was awesome to listen to them go back and forth. So they did come out with a hardback version. It's the script, the same way they did with Dooku Jedi Lost, which is why it's on this list now. And I really, really enjoyed it. So, yeah, Dr. Aphra. Look, if you guys remember, we'll talk about Dooku here in a little bit, but you guys remember hearing me talk about how with Dooku, I tried listening to it, couldn't, ended up just reading the book. This is one you guys are going to want to listen to. especially hearing these comic characters for the first time kind of get life breathed into them by voice actors. And it's really a neat experience. I really enjoyed this one a lot. So Dr. Aphra by Sarah Kuhn is number 43 on my list. Number 42 on my list is The Legends of Luke Skywalker by Ken Liu. This is a book that came out, I want to say before The Last Jedi. And this isn't a novel that follows Luke Skywalker. It's a novel that follows a group of smugglers. I don't want to say smugglers. Pirates, maybe? Is that the word I should use? Pirates? And they're telling stories to each other throughout this book, their own legends of Luke Skywalker that they've heard. And that's what the book is basically made up is these 5 or 6 like stories of Luke. And a couple of them are badass. There's a couple of really good stories in here where, when we see Luke in The Last Jedi on Octo 2, he uses that big spear to spear the fish and, hundreds of feet below him in the water. And we see him do that for the first time. But in this particular story, he's traveling the universe, the galaxy, and he's meeting with all these different cultures, and he's trying to learn their version of the Force. Obviously, it's all the Force, but everybody calls it something different. These particular people call it the Tide, and they're trying to teach him how to use it to breathe underwater and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got stories, from a sand flea's point of view in the Rancor pit that's whispering in Luke's ear, telling him when to duck when the Rancor is trying to sweep at him. And Luke thinks it's the Force talking to him. It's like, oh, crap, come on. So there's this huge, like, swinging spectrum between, holy crap, that's good, and you got to be kidding me, like, back and forth. But overall, it was an enjoyable story. At one point, they come face-to-face with Luke Skywalker and don't even realize it. And when you read Luke Skywalker written in this book as Luke Skywalker, it's not Luke. He's written like Mark Hamill. When you read that, you don't even see Luke. Like, you don't hear Luke in the voice. You hear Mark Hamill, like, trolling them, is basically what it sounds like. So, Legends of Luke Skywalker is number 42 on my list. It's worth picking up. I would say if you want to be entertained, it's worth picking up. There's one story, too, inside of an Exogorth. Awesome. So, number 42 is Legends of Luke Skywalker. Number 41 is one that I'm surprised we've never got a sequel to, and it is Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away, Volume 1, Aliens by Landry? I think it's Landry Walker. This was a collection of, I think, 6 or 7 short stories that span all kinds of time periods, from before Phantom Menace to all the way to Force Awakens. Like, it's just all over the place. A couple of the stories are really cool. Baba Joe from Jakku has got a cool story in this book. One that I really enjoyed reading that story. Unkar Platt's got a love story in it, believe it or not. That one was kind of tough to get through. But the one story that really stood out, and this is one that I used to really drive home the selling point of this book. There's one story in it, I think it's toward the end of the book actually, called The Crimson Corsair and the Lost Treasure of Count Dooku. The Crimson Corsair is the guy wearing the red mask from The Force Awakens that Finn was trying to hitch a ride with, and on Takodana. And he comes across this old separatist ship and the treasure of Count Dooku. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it is like mind-blowingly awesome. But they find this. I mean, I'll say this: it's a huge callback to Clone Wars. Huge callback to Clone Wars. If you're a Clone Wars fan, you're going to lose your mind when you read this story. If you guys have read it, you know what I'm talking about. So the stories swing wildly in all these different directions. Like I said, the Baba Joe story was kind of interesting. It was one of those from a certain point of view kind of stories, you know what I mean? So it was kind of interesting. I can't believe we never got a volume 2, like Tales from a Galaxy Far, Far Away, volume 2 Droids or something like that. You know, I'm surprised we never got that. So Tales is number 41 on my list. Number 40 on my list is Before the Awakening by Greg Rucka. This was one of those 3-hour reads that came out right before The Force Awakens released. And it's broken into 3 parts. It is a Poe story, a Finn story, and a Rey story. The Rey story being my favorite. The Poe story, I need to go back and reread now that I've read Poe Dameron Freefall, because I want to see if there's any discrepancies between the two, because I've heard there is. With how he joined the New Republic and the Resistance and everything, I want to go back and see if, you know, how bad it's not lining up. But I don't know for a fact how bad it is yet. But the Poe story was interesting. The Finn story was kind of cool. Him being a stormtrooper and kind of starting to realize he didn't want to be a stormtrooper, and that he's, kind of getting to the point where we see him at the beginning of The Force Awakens. The Rey story was really cool. She's on Jakku. She finds this old starship. She starts fixing it up. She's sitting there thinking, I'm going to turn this in for thousands of portions, and she actually gets it to fly and whatnot. And you hear her talk in The Force Awakens about how she flew simulators, but she never left the planet. That's in this story. So it was a neat little read. And like I said, you can go through this whole book in like 3 or 4 hours. Very, very interesting reads, and actually pretty enjoyable. So that's number 40 on my list. Number 39 is Smuggler's Run by Greg Rucka. Also one of those 3-hour short novels. And this one is a Han Solo and Chewie story, and it's not bad. It's all right. This novel actually, before the Chewbacca comic ever came out, this book said in canon that Chewie got a medal. Everybody's complaining how Chewie didn't get a medal after the Death Star battle in this. This book said he did. And it takes place right after A New Hope. In the book, when we first see Chewie, he's holding the medal and fingering it, and that sounded bad. Sorry. But you get what I'm saying. He's just kind of toying with it and whatnot. So it's an interesting little novel. Not one that really stands out. Han and Chewie are tasked by Leia to go get a rebel informant. So they come across this female Imperial officer who's like half cybernetic on her face. I don't remember what her name is, though. It's been a long time since I read it. I need to reread it. But it's an interesting read. IDW has done a 2-issue adaptation of it, a comic adaptation of it. And they did one for the next one we're going to talk about also. But it's honestly, you could go, look, if you don't feel like spending 3 hours to read this book, honestly, go pick up the IDW 2-issue adaptation. It's abridged, obviously, but it's all you need to know. It's perfect. It's a perfect adaptation, perfect comic adaptation of the story. You're not going to miss anything. And it's not bad at all. So Smuggler's Run is number 39 on my list. Number 38 on my list is Weapon of the Jedi by Jason Fry. This is another one of those little novels that's a 3-hour read. IDW did a 2-issue adaptation of this one as well. You can read that instead of this and just get the entire story. But this happens immediately after Heir to the Jedi. It kind of makes up for Heir to the Jedi. It's Luke taking what he's learned in Heir and kind of applying it and going on this like training mission, basically, with R2. And he's being chased down by a bounty hunter character called Sarko Plank, which after this, never heard from him again. He made an appearance in The Force Awakens. He had a Lego figure in The Force Awakens Lego game, and an action figure, and never heard anything else about him ever again. And that's it. I mean, Luke basically is I don't want to say hiding from him, but yeah, I guess he is. He's hiding from this Sarko Plank the entire story and learning to be a Jedi at the same time. There's a really cool moment in it when he finally starts to figure it out and he falls into the Force and he learns how to really use it well, and he fights for hours and doesn't seem like hours. It seems like minutes to him. And R2's like, yeah, no, it's been a minute. So there's some cool moments in it. And like I said, it really does make up for Heir to the Jedi. And it focuses a lot on Luke learning how to use his lightsaber. So kind of a neat little read. It's number 38. Number 37 on my list is my favorite of that little trilogy that came out, because Smuggler's Run, Weapon of a Jedi, and number 37, Moving Target, all came out on the same day, and this one's a Leia story, and this is my favorite one out of all three of them that were released that day. Moving Target is set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Leia's dealing with the fact that Han has been frozen in carbonite, and, she doesn't know where Boba Fett went with him, which we do now, but... And this one, I guess it leans closer towards Return of the Jedi. I'm assuming this is all taking place after the War of the Bounty Hunters comic. But this book came out in September of 2015, leading up to The Force Awakens, so we didn't have Rogue One yet. This book was the first time that I saw in Star Wars kind of the gray area that the Rebel Alliance was willing to operate in. And they were basically using civilian ships as decoys for the Empire, thinking that's the Rebel fleet, while they were amassing near Sullust to go attack the second Death Star. Kind of a messed up thing to do, right? But this is a really cool story, and Leia goes on this mission to try to drop these beacons, basically, to get civilians to group together so the Empire thinks that's them amassing when they're really over here. Really cool to see the Rebel Alliance operating in the gray area. And then obviously we got more of that with Rogue One when, Cassian is talking about we've all done things we're not proud of, that kind of thing. So it was really neat to read that for the first time all the way back in 2015 and to kind of see where Lucasfilm was kind of taking the Rebel Alliance and kind of what they were willing to do in between the films that we all knew and loved and kind of show what everybody was. It was really, really cool. So I really enjoyed Moving Target. It's number 37 on my list. Number 36 is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story by Alexander Freed. This is the novelization of the film Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. This book was a verbatim retelling of Rogue One. It's this far up on my list because it's Rogue One. I love Rogue One. There's a couple of extra little scenes in it that we didn't get in the movie. Bodhi's time with Borgullet is in there, kind of what he was thinking while he was being, I guess, what's the word you can use? Brain sucked, brain telepath. I don't know what the word I'm supposed to use for that is. But there's a lot of cool moments in it. And what I like the most about this book is how, at the time, when Rogue One came out, there was no opening crawl, and a lot of people said it needed an opening crawl. That book that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, Catalyst, a Rogue One story, that whole novel is basically the prologue to Rogue One. And so I had read that, and then I read this, and this book is if you don't watch the film Rogue One and you just read Catalyst and then this back to back, it's one massive story. And it blends together so beautifully. There's mentions in the Rogue One novel that go back to Catalyst. I don't want to ruin anything for you guys, but there are some mentions that go back to that. So it almost feels like those two books are a duology. And I guess you could throw Tarkin in there too, because Tarkin was kind of a big thing with Catalyst also. But if you read those two, there's some mentions back to Catalyst and to what happened back then in Rogue One. So it was really nice as somebody who reads all this stuff and who reads all these books to kind of get some of those callbacks, and whatnot. So Rogue One, A Star Wars Story by Alexander Freed is number 36 on my list. Very enjoyable. Number 35 on my list is one that has moved up on the ranking a little bit. And I kind of have a new appreciation for this book. It's Phasma by Delilah Dawson. Phasma is obviously the backstory to Captain Phasma. And it's told in a way where it's not the present day. And when I say present day in a book, I'm referring to the actual time period where the book is taking place. It's not actually her backstory. The present day stuff in this book takes place pretty soon before episode 7. Vi Marati, who is a resistance spy, she's got an actress at Galaxy's Edge who plays her. She's tasked by Leia. I don't remember what she was tasked to do right off what exactly her mission was, because she never got to do it. She's captured by a First Order captain called Captain Cardinal. He's basically Captain Phasma, but his name's Captain Cardinal. He's got all red armor. Very cool character. Very cool character. Captain Cardinal's a badass. And he is basically interrogating Vi Marati for any information she has on Captain Phasma, trying to get Phasma's past out so that he can take Phasma down and basically take her place, right, in the First Order. There's a rivalry between the two. And very, very cool how they go to Vi Marati telling the story, and then it kind of flashes back, and then it shows Phasma's history. Kind of shows where she comes from, how brutal it was. It was a very primitive planet that she was from. It shows how brutal she could be. There's a decapitation in it that just had my jaw dropped. It shows what she's willing to do, who she's willing to throw under the bus to get ahead, in the interest of herself. Shows how she joins the First Order, how she gets there, who she has to betray along the way, where her armor comes from, what her armor is made of, which was very interesting. It was kind of a neat little touch to the story, why it looks a little bit different than other Stormtrooper armor. But it's kind of a cool little backstory with Phasma and kind of where she's coming from, especially considering I think she was criminally underused in the films. It was kind of neat to get some more. And this is a story that last year, if you'd have asked me, I wasn't a big fan of it. It's kind of grown on me now, and it's a really fun read, to be honest. It's kind of got a little bit of I don't want to say Mad Max because there's not like vehicle chases in it or anything like that. But as far as like the culture she came from, I guess that's really the best way I can describe it. She was a warrior, so a very primitive warrior. But it was a lot of fun to read, and it kind of ties in with the next one we're going to talk about, because actually the next one we're going to talk about is a proper sequel to it, believe it or not, and a lot of people don't realize this. So Phasma is number 35 on my list. Number 34 is Galaxy's Edge Black Spire, also by Delilah Dawson. Like I just said, this is a direct sequel to Phasma, not in the way that it's a sequel to Phasma's backstory. It's a sequel to the present-day stuff in Phasma with Vi Marati and Captain Cardinal. It's a sequel to that part of it. In this book, Vi Marati has been tasked to go to Batuu, to Black Spire, to set up a resistance outpost. She takes Captain Cardinal with her, who I guess is kind of a spoiler for Phasma, who I don't want to say defected from the First Order in Phasma, but ends up with the resistance. I'm not going to say how it happened, but he ends up with the resistance. He goes with Vi Marati to Black Spire to set up this resistance base. He's dealing with some injuries that he sustained in Phasma. And no, this book doesn't have anything to do with Phasma whatsoever. But it's very interesting the way those two books are tied together. And I see this as a proper sequel to Phasma. Vi Marati is she has to get a job to start paying for stuff. She's trying to recruit resistance members. And they told us when this book came out that there was a tie-in. I don't remember who said it. It might have been Delilah Dawson on Twitter. I could be wrong. I might be putting words in her mouth. But I seem to recall somebody saying that this book had a direct tie-in with episode 9 leading up to it. And upon reading it, there's no tie-in with episode 9 whatsoever in this book. There is a tie-in with A Crash of Fate, but this is a pretty enjoyable read. This is one that was a lot of fun. A lot of twists and turns in this one. And if you really like the whole Black Spire Batuu thing, you're going to love this book. If you like Phasma, I would definitely, if you're going to read this, definitely read Phasma first. It kind of sucks that you have to read one book to know what's going on in this one. But trust me, they're worth reading back to back. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to read those two back to back. I'm going to see what it's like to read those back to back. Yeah, number 34 is Galaxy's Edge Black Spire by Delilah Dawson. Number 33 on my list is Star Wars from a Certain Point of View, and it's by 40 different authors. It's 40 short stories celebrating 40 years of Star Wars. This is 40 short stories from 40 different points of view, telling the story of A New Hope, but not through the eyes of the audience, but through the eyes of background characters, which is a really cool concept. Really cool concept. And I feel like it was executed well. They just spent too much damn time in the cantina, which I knew was going to happen. But basically, the first story hits the ground running, and it's the gap between Rogue One and A New Hope. That's the first story. And then everything else is just told from different people's points of view. Very, very neat stories in here. There's one in particular, Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, which you guys know that I worship at the altar of Claudia Gray when it comes to Star Wars canon. But she wrote the story called Master and Apprentice. It's the part of A New Hope where Luke has gone to find his aunt and uncle after they find the Jawa Sandcrawler, having been attacked by Imperials. And while he's gone, Obi-Wan is visited by the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn. And their interactions back and forth are so awesome. And it's just, Qui-Gon knows Obi-Wan's time is drawing near, but he doesn't say anything. We all know how that ended. But it was kind of interesting to have him come as a Force ghost to Obi-Wan. And it was such a good story that they ended up asking her to write a novel called Master and Apprentice that was a Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan story before Phantom Menace, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But there's some really cool stories in here. Like I said, they were in the cantina so damn long. It's almost like if you look at the book, if you hold the book up and you're looking at the spine, if you take half the book in the center, that's basically the cantina. It just goes on forever. Going into it, I thought that would be a lot of fun, seeing a lot of stuff from the cantina, but it was just, oh my God. You would think, okay, we're done with the cantina. Next story in the cantina. Like, Jesus, okay, we get it. So if you want to read a lot of cantina stories, they're there. But there's a lot of really good stuff. And what's cool about this book is you don't necessarily have to sit down and read it beginning to end. You could just go through and pick out the stories you want to read and you can figure out exactly where they go in the book or in the film and what's going on, in the film in the background and stuff. So there's some really neat stories in there, and it's definitely worth picking up. So Star Wars from a Certain Point of View is number 33 on my list. Number 32 on my list is kind of a pleasant surprise for me, and it was Cobalt Squadron by Elizabeth Wein. And this is another one of those little 3-hour read books, real thin novel. And it takes place during The Force Awakens. It's a Rose Tico. It's a Rose and Paige Tico story, and it basically explains why the bomber squadron was not at the Battle of Starkiller Base. They were busy elsewhere. Is basically all it is. But when you watch The Last Jedi and you see how Rose is so torn up over Paige's death, because Paige had one speaking line in the entire movie, and it was her calling up to somebody who, was up the ladder above her. And she had this death scene which carried zero weight at all until you kind of see Rose and you realize that they were, brother and sister. You realize they were sisters. And this story really drives home how close they were. And, kind of their background, where they came from, their mom and dad, stuff like that. And like I said, why they were so close. And where the hell Cobalt Squadron was during The Force Awakens. So if it's something that's bothering you, why they weren't there, read this. I know Rose isn't a huge popular character among Star Wars fans. I get it. I understand why. I choose to enjoy her as a character. And I get that she wasn't a fan favorite. But this is a book that, honestly, wasn't all that bad, and it's nothing galaxy shattering in the book that you have to read this to know what's going on somewhere else. You don't. But if you don't have anything else to read and you feel like picking it up, I would pick it up, and it's honestly an enjoyable little story. So Cobalt Squadron is number 32 on my list. All right, let's talk about something that I haven't got to talk about on the podcast for a long time. Let's talk about some High Republic. Number 31 on my list is the High Republic Young Readers Trilogy, which actually isn't finished yet. Actually, it is finished, but as far as the end of 2021, it wasn't finished yet. It's made up of The High Republic: A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland, Race to Crash Point Tower by Daniel Jose Older, and Mission to Disaster by Justina Ireland, which just came out this year, so we're not going to talk about it. I haven't read it yet, so we're not going to talk about that one yet. It's not a 2021 novel. But as of now, where this trilogy rests, because of those two, the first two novels, this is where it's sitting. A Test of Courage was by Justina Ireland, and like I said earlier, going into this, and I was like, oh gosh, she wrote Spark of the Resistance. I don't want to read this. But it's a pleasant surprise. Test of Courage follows a Jedi during the High Republic era named Vernesta Rowe. She's the youngest Jedi to get the title of Jedi Knight at the age of 15. And she goes on this mission. She doesn't have a Padawan at the time. The mission goes haywire. There's another Jedi with his Padawan there. The ship they're on is damaged. I'm not going to say how. But they get separated. They go on an escape pod, Vernesta and this Padawan, and they find out later that everybody else on the ship was killed. And Vernesta finds herself having to deal with this Padawan kind of grieving his master and kind of dealing with a little bit of dark streak. So it was a very enjoyable book, especially for a young reader. I really enjoyed this one quite a bit. Vernesta Rowe is an awesome character. I'm excited to see what they do with her in the future. Her lightsaber is freaking awesome. She has a purple lightsaber, but if she twists the emitter, it turns into a light whip, which sounds stupid to some people, but it's just awesomely executed in this book. It's very, very cool. She even mentions to, I think it's Avar Chris, how, she hasn't said anything to her former master, about why her lightsaber is that way or anything like that. So it's very, very cool. Race to Crash Point Tower is basically a sequel to that. And let me go back to A Test of Courage for a second. A Test of Courage happens concurrently with the Light of the Jedi. So it's happening at the exact same time as that novel. Race to Crash Point Tower kind of supplements the second novel in that High Republic trilogy, The Rising Storm. And during The Rising Storm, I don't want to give too much away if you guys haven't read it, because there's one particular point in this book that supplements another part of that book. So there's this massive event happening in the main Del Rey novels for High Republic, okay? I don't want to give it away. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, I don't want to be the one to spoil it for you. I'll say this. There's an attack. I'm not going to say where or on who or who's doing it, but there's an attack. And during this attack, this story over here, Race to Crash Point Tower, is happening. Now, during this attack, all the communications for where it's happening are out. Nobody can get a message in or out. They can't figure out why. This book kind of answers it. And it's them kind of fixing that problem, and you see it coming back full circle in this book. So when they say they're telling this High Republic story as one massive story, they really are doing it. So Race to Crash Point Tower is Vernestra Rowe again, and being involved with the Jedi that's trying to fix this communications tower. It was a nice little read. It was one that I was like, oh, it was kind of a neat, because I had just come off of I just said it. What was the name of that book? The Rising Storm. I just come off of The Rising Storm and then went straight into this, and so it was kind of cool seeing. And there was even lines of dialogue. There's one part that happens in Rising Storm where this Padawan pops up and then never see him again, and then that's the Padawan from this book, and you can see exactly where the books cross over. So it was kind of neat. I even compared the dialogue, and there's a couple of little discrepancies, but nothing huge, nothing galaxy shattering, nothing book breaking. But it's the same events happening, so it was kind of cool to see. The third book in that trilogy, Mission to Disaster by Justina Ireland, is out now. It came out, I think, the first week of January. I have it. I haven't read it yet because I wanted to get this episode out before I started reading anything from 2022. But it will round out that trilogy. Depending on how well that book is received or how well I enjoy it, it may change where this entire trilogy moves up and down the list. So we'll see next year where it's at. But I'm really looking forward to reading it, even though it's written by Justina Ireland. I'm really enjoying these young adult novels, believe it or not, these young readers. And I'm really excited to see where the High Republic, where this phase is going to end. So they're number 31 on my list. Number 30 is The Queen's Trilogy by E.K. Johnston. Where it sits now, so far, Queen's Shadow and Queen's Peril are the only two novels that have been released. Queen's Hope is set for release, I believe, in April. And it will round out that trilogy. Queen's Shadow actually takes place after Queen's Peril. But they were released Shadow, then Peril. Queen's Shadow is Padme. Basically, she's no longer queen, and she's been asked to be senator by the new queen coming in. And it's her kind of trying to get out from everybody looking at her as royalty and now as a senator. And Queen's Shadow actually refers to Sabe, who she was played by Keira Knightley in episode 1, and how close those two characters are. And Queen's Shadow really showed and really drove home how well all the handmaidens worked together and kind of their system and how it all worked. When you get into Queen's Peril, it goes back to her being elected queen and meeting all these girls and kind of the dynamic of them learning to work together and getting to know each other and whatnot. And then basically the whole second half of Queen's Peril is the queen's point of view of Phantom Menace. So Queen's Hope is going to be, if I remember right, if I remember what I read, it's going to be her point of view of everything from, like, I think Revenge of the Sith. So I'm really excited to read it. I'm really enjoying this trilogy so far. I liked Queen's Shadow more than I did Queen's Peril. But this is a neat little trilogy to read. You know, there's not a lot of Padme material at all, actually. And so it's kind of nice to see Padme getting some love, especially considering, you know, her character was basically just a plot device in episode 3, which was kind of a letdown considering how badass she is in Clone Wars. But it was kind of nice to get some material around Padme. So we'll see where this trilogy moves. Once Queen's Hope comes out, it may move the trilogy up and down. I'm hoping it moves it up. I'm hoping all of these come out and move their trilogies up. I'm hoping everything just gets better and better as we go. So we will see come next year where Queen's Hope ends up landing the Queen's Trilogy. So it is number 30 on my list. Number 29 is Canto Bight. It is 4 short stories. I don't want to say short stories. It's 4 novelettes, is what I'll say, surrounding Canto Bight. It came out around the time of The Last Jedi, and it's 4 separate authors. And I'm gonna tell you the selling point for this book. And we talked about it a little bit years ago. We had John Jackson Miller on for an episode of the Star Wars Canon Podcast. We did an interview with him, and which is still on the channel. You guys can go check that out. Very nice guy to talk to. And I I got to mention to him how his story in Canto Bight was my absolute favorite. It's called The Ride, and it is an amazing book. And it's basically all these books are surrounding the casino, right? And the city of Canto Bight. So this particular story is this guy who's like losing over and over and over and over again. And he's got till basically morning to come up with the money to pay off somebody. And so he's trying to bet it, and he keeps losing. He keeps getting further and further and further in the hole. And it's such a fun story to read. It's so much fun. It's my favorite of the 4 stories. The other 3 are honestly kind of forgettable. I'm not going to lie. If you guys pick this up, I would pick it up just to read The Ride. I absolutely adore that story. I love it. I can't wait to read it again. So Canto Bight is number 29 on my list. Number 28 is the novel that started it all with the new canon. It is A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. This is one that, like I said, I reread it, and it's moved up on the list. I really enjoyed reading this book the second time around. The first time, I don't remember why I was so apprehensive about this book. Now that I went back and reread it, I really do enjoy this book a lot. Count Vidian is just an absolute bastard in this book. He's an awesome villain. For those of you that don't know, this is the first novel that came out in the Star Wars canon, written by John Jackson Miller, and this is the novel of how Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla met, basically, and this is set before Rebels. It's set somewhere, I want to say, between Solo and Rebels. Kanan is trying to hide his Force abilities. He's working as a miner on this planet called Gorse. Quotas are down for the Empire on this mining planet, and so they bring in a businessman named Count Vidian, who's basically like a pseudo-Vader. He's more cybernetic than man, and he's just, forget the old way, do it my way now. I don't care. He's just brutal. Work triple shifts. I don't care. Like, do what you have to. And, and he murders several people in this book because they just get in his way. And he's an utter bastard. And I don't remember him being that big of a bastard. I loved him in this book. So I really do enjoy A New Dawn quite a bit. If you want to see how Kanan and Hera met, this is the book to read. And you get a little bit of backstory on Kanan. And it's really cool. Because remember, this book came out before Rebels aired for the first time. So this was our first, when this book first came out, they came out in November, I want to say, October, November. Maybe it was September even, of 2014. So this was, and Rebels didn't air until spring of 15. So this was our first look at those characters and kind of their dynamic. And now that we've seen all of Rebels, all 4 seasons, going back and rereading this, it was really cool. And seeing how they got together again. So A New Dawn is number 28 on my list. Number 27 is Solo, A Star Wars Story by Mur Lafferty. This is the novelization for Solo, A Star Wars Story. The reason this is so far up on my list, because for those of you that don't know, I'm not a huge fan of Solo. I don't hate Solo. I'm not one of those people, it's like, we didn't ask for a Han Solo movie. I'm not one of those guys. I just wasn't a huge fan of Solo. And it was, there were so many other stories that they could have told. Why go with Han Solo? You know what I mean? And after reading this book, I'm convinced that they had a little bit of a plan to do some kind of trilogy with these 3 standalone movies, with Rogue One, Solo, and then something else. I don't know what, but there's a tie-in with this novel that ties back directly to Rogue One. And there's some things in this book that kind of stand out, that kind of fix a few things in the films for me. Some interactions here and there that are written a little bit differently, a little more tolerable. And overall, I think I had more fun reading the book for Solo than I did watching the film, which is weird because it's Star Wars. It's always more fun to watch the film. But anyway, I shouldn't say not always. We're going to talk about another one here in a little bit where the book is way better than the movie. But anyway, there's a little scene at the end of this book that ties directly into Rogue One where Saw Gerrera and Jyn Erso are both there. And so I really think, and I don't know for a fact, there were a lot of rumors about another standalone film, a Boba Fett film or something like that was going to happen a long time ago. And we don't know exactly what their plan was. We don't know what they were putting together. But because of that scene, I can't help but feel like maybe there was something that was going to tie all 3 of those films together. It would have been kind of neat to find out somewhere down the road what that would have been. I don't know, but yeah, the novelization for Solo, A Star Wars Story for me is number 27. Number 26 on my list was a pleasant surprise for me because at the time, I was a huge prequel hater. And it is Dark Disciple by Christy Golden, When Dark Disciple was first announced in 2015, I was just like, oh, crap. I should have known they were going to do prequel stuff. At the time, I wasn't a huge prequel fan. I mean, like, at all. I never watched the prequels. I always watched the classic trilogy. I did like Clone Wars, but I didn't really care for anything else. And I was like, all right, Dark Disciple's coming out. I'll give it a shot. And this book blew me away. I love Dark Disciple. It's a Quinlan Vos, Asajj Ventress story, which is an interesting combination, right? For those of you that don't know, Quinlan Vos is a Jedi in the Order that has Force psychometry. We talked about that earlier with Force Collector, how he can touch an object and see its history. And in this story, it happens during the Clone Wars. And actually, it's written from unaired episodes of Clone Wars, where the Jedi Order and the Jedi Council has come to the conclusion that maybe they need to start walking a darker line, and they need to assassinate Count Dooku. And they say, they start coming. Obi-Wan's on the council, and they're trying to figure out who's going to be a good Jedi to go do an assassination mission. And they come up with Quinlan Vos. And so they tell him, the best way to get close to Dooku is work with Asajj Ventress. She's been jaded so many times by Dooku. She's tried to kill him already a couple times. Work with her undercover, because Quinlan was this undercover Jedi. He was doing a lot of undercover work for the Jedi. And so they chose him. And he ends up teaming up with Asajj Ventress under the guise of a bounty hunter, and basically tells her, I've got beef with Dooku. You want to help me? And so it's them teaming up to try to take out Count Dooku. I'm going to warn you, this is a love story. This is a love story between Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress. As weird as that sounds, it's these two fall for each other. Not going to tell you how, not going to tell you when, not going to tell you what leads to it. But eventually, these two fall for each other. And it's a very interesting dynamic. It's a very interesting dynamic. You want to look at Asajj Ventress in an entirely different light from anything you've ever seen before, read this book. She is so dynamic in this book. It is so refreshing to read and very enjoyable. So I was pleasantly surprised with this book. It's honestly one of my favorite prequel era pieces of canon. I absolutely adore Dark Disciple. Great book. You guys won't be disappointed if you pick it up. It's number 26 on my list. Number 25 is the novelization for The Force Awakens by Alan Dean Foster. Before I start trying to explain why this is so high on the list, because it's literally a verbatim novelization of Episode 7. Hear me out. This is why it's so high on the list. If it wasn't for this particular kind of dynamic going on in the book, it wouldn't be this high on my list. You get to hear a lot of what people are thinking in this book. It's not just seeing what they're doing or hearing what they're saying. You get to really get inside their brains a lot in this book. And one of my favorite moments in this book is when Rey and Kylo are fighting on Starkiller Base. And Rey finally knocks Kylo down, and she's, kind of stalking around him. You know what I mean? Getting ready to pounce. The dialogue is there of, yes, do it. Attack him. And it's written a lot like Palpatine, right? And at the time, we had no idea, right? I don't think they'd had an idea, but you know what I'm saying? At the time, we were just like, what? And so that's the main reason this book is so high on my list, is you get to really go inside these people's heads, these characters' heads, and really break down what they're feeling and what they're thinking. When Kylo's interrogating Rey and you go inside their heads, awesome. Absolutely awesome. So that is why The Force Awakens is so high on my list, the novel. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be near where it is on my list. It'd be way up higher. It'd probably be in the 40s somewhere. But for that alone, it puts it at 25. Very enjoyable read. Really enjoyed it. So Force Awakens is number 25. Number 24 is one that kind of surprised me too a little bit. It's Guardians of the Whills. It's by Greg Rucka. This is a little, I want to say, like 3-4 hour read thing. It's not like in the same vein as the other 3 hour reads, what I call 3 hour reads. This is just a small little hardback, kind of young reader book. It's a Chiru Imwe and Baze Mobis story. on Jeddah before Rogue One. And it's kind of cool to see these two interact the way they do, and kind of how they're seen by the neighborhood, by their community, by other people on Jeddah. Kind of how they interact with other people on Jeddah. You get a little bit of their backstory too, with them talking back and forth and kind of having conversations, and you learn a little bit about them. But honestly, you don't really learn that much. It's just the dynamic between the two. I don't want to say the banter, but the way the two talk back and forth. The story itself is, I mean, it's a Cherutin-based story. It's something exactly they would do. They're trying to save some orphans. I mean, that's as righteous as you can get, right? It's a neat little story. I really like it because Chirrut Îmwe is my favorite character in Rogue One. I absolutely loved him. And so I really, really enjoyed this story. I connected with it a lot, and I thought it was a lot of fun. If you're a big Rogue One fan, if you're a big Chirrut and Baze fan, if you're a big Donnie Yen fan, go read this book. It's really cool. Like I said, it won't take you very long, and it's a lot of fun. It's not a necessity. It's not essential reading for anything. Rogue One did a great job of explaining who these characters were and setting them up and their relationship and everything. But if you want to add a little bit to it, go. If you want to salt your dinner a little bit with this story, I would do it. It's going to enhance it a little bit for you. So, Guardians of the Whills by Greg Rucka. Very cool story. You won't be disappointed. Number 23 on my list is Battlefront Twilight Company by Alexander Freed. Now, there might be people out there going, but there's a Battlefront 2. Why don't you have these two together? The two Battlefront books have nothing to do with each other. So they're individual novels as far as I'm concerned. Number 23 is Battlefront Twilight Company. This was a novel that was released the same time as the first Battlefront game, which was all multiplayer stuff. Remember, there was no story to it whatsoever. It was just strictly, here's a Star Wars game for you. And so this book follows Twilight Company. It kind of spans a little bit of time throughout the classic trilogy. And this book's a little slow at first, but it really picks up about halfway through. The reason I connect with this book so much is this book came out 2016. I want to say it was no, it wasn't. Yeah, it had to have been toward the end of, it had to have been beginning of 2016. Or the very end of 2015, because the game came out right before the movie did, before Force Awakens did. So it had to have been somewhere right there. But anyway, this was the first time in Star Wars that we really saw a gritty kind of from the soldier's point of view story in Star Wars, where you see soldiers who are sleeping in the rain and just, I mean, miserable where they're at. I connect with the story because when I was in the military, I had a lot of those same experiences. I remember sleeping on the hood of a Humvee, as weird as it sounds, in my underwear because it was warmer that way, in a sleeping bag on the hood of a Humvee in the pouring rain, in the middle of the desert. I remember that's one of those experiences that just sticks with me. And there's stuff like that, and that was a week straight that happened. That's why I connect so much with this particular story, is I can relate to it. And to see that in a Star Wars setting was very cool. And like I said, the first part of the story was really, really slow. It was a lot of talking. It was a lot of talking. But once it finally kicked off, I mean, it really picked up and it went. Very enjoyable. And I think it's worth reading the first half to get to the second half. I'm going to say that. I really think it is. If you're worried about reading it because of the slow first half, the second half pays off. It makes the first half worth it. So it was a very enjoyable book. I really, really thought it was great. And I really wish, even though they're not doing any more Battlefront games, I don't think, I would still like more Battlefront novels, especially after Battlefront 2, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, I really do want some more Battlefront novels. Really enjoyed them quite a bit. That was number 23 on my list. Number 22 is a trilogy that I really wanted to talk about, and it is the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig. This was a great trilogy. It's made up of Aftermath, Life, Debt, and Empire's End. On my original ranking, the first Aftermath book was a lot lower on the list. I mean, it was closer to the bottom of the list. And Life Debt and Empire's End were a lot higher. Now that I've reread all three of these books back to back, I really, really love this trilogy. It's written in present tense, which is a little jarring at first, but I've grown to love these characters again, and they're absolutely awesome. Aftermath takes place immediately after Return of the Jedi. The Empire has lost the second Death Star. Word is starting to get out. The Empire is basically reeling from the Rebel Alliance telling the universe, or telling the galaxy, the Death Star's destroyed. The Empire's gone. The Empire's not gone. You blew up 2 Death Stars. That's not the Empire. There's more out there. Not everybody was on the Death Star. So, which makes sense, right? We always thought blow up the second Death Star, that's the end of it. No, there's way more factions on different planets. I mean, it makes sense that there would be a resistance of the Empire, a remnant. And it's still them going back and forth. This entire trilogy ends up leading up to the Battle of Jakku. This whole trilogy takes place over the course of a year. It follows Timon Wexley, who is Snap Wexley from The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, as a child. His mother, Nora, who flew the Y-Wing. She was the only Y-Wing to come back from the first Death Star. And she was the Y-Wing pilot to lead some of the TIE fighters back to the surface out of the center of the second Death Star. And she's come back. She's having a rough relationship with her son because she just gone up and went and fought for the rebellion. And so he's got some kind of feelings about it. And in the background, the Empire is trying to come up with a way to basically come back to power. And Ray Sloan has taken the mantle of Admiral, Grand Admiral Ray Sloan. And she's basically calling herself the new Emperor of the Empire. She's trying to put together a secret mission on Nora's home planet to kind of put together this council to bring the Empire back. And everybody finds out about it, and it's just this big shitstorm, basically, right? So the second novel, Life Debt, which is a lot of fun, Leia hires the same crew, it's Nora Wexley and the crew from the first book, to go find Han Solo, who's on Kashyyyk trying to free the Wookiees. And they run into Han, they find out Chewie's been captured, and they're trying to find all these prisoners that the Empire has taken over the years. I don't want to say what happens because there's a huge moment. I'll say what I did for the High Republic books. There's an attack that just throws everything into disarray. Not going to say where, not going to say when, not going to say who. But there's an attack, and it really is a blow to the New Republic. And it's a lot of fun. This is my favorite one out of the trilogy. Basically ends with the Battle of Jakku getting ready to go down. And then basically the entire third book is Battle of Jakku. And it is absolutely bonkers. And I'm serious. The entire last book is Battle of Jakku. This is a trilogy that you have to read from beginning to end. You have to read 1, 2, 3. You can't just start with 3 because you want to read the Battle of Jakku. Trust me, look, I love slow burn stories. I love stories that, not a lot of stuff makes sense at first, and then slowly starts to go up, and you're like, oh my God, like Twilight Company, it was just like slow action, there was no build. It wasn't a slow burn. It was just like, oh my God, is this ever gonna, oh, okay, gotcha. This trilogy is slow. Holy crap, this is getting awesome. And then it crescendos with the Battle of Jakku. And it's all payoff. It's so much fun to read. Timon's got a droid that I absolutely adore. He's one of my favorite droids in canon. His name is Mr. Bones. He's an old battle droid who's a badass. He's freaking Billy Badass. He's B1 Billy Badass. And he's just absolutely insane. And I'm pretty sure he's the canon version of HK-47. The only reason I say that, there's a line, and in which book was it? I want to say it's Empire's End. I think it is Empire's End. There's a line where he says, query. And then, the way HK-47 used to say in Knights of the Old Republic, he'd be like, query, can I dispose of the meat bags now, master? And you're like, that's HK-47. So there was a nice little nod to HK in there. But this trilogy is absolutely amazing. If you're going to read it, read the whole thing. Commit to the entire trilogy. Sit down and work your way through it. I promise you it will it'll pay off. I adore this trilogy. Absolutely great. So Aftermath Trilogy is number 22 on my list. Moving right along, number 21 is Rebel Rising by Beth Revis. This is a Jyn Erso novel. It came out about the time as Rogue One. It's kind of in the same format as Most Wanted. However, this book is not really a love story. It's Jyn. It picks up the moment Saw Gerrera finds her after Galen has been taken, after Lyra has been killed in Rogue One. And it picks up that moment where he says, come, we have a long ride ahead of us. Like, it picks up that moment. And she goes with him, and it kind of goes through how he trained her and how proficient she started to become with a blaster and with her fighting skills. And, in Rogue One, he says, you were becoming the best fighter in my cadre. People were starting to figure out who you were, and that's in this book. And when she says, you left me to die, you gave me a knife and stuck me in a hole and left me till morning and left me to die, that's in this book. You really understand why. You see why. Because of this book, you can understand why Jyn was so jaded in Rogue One. Why she was just like so out for herself. She was so guarded. This book explains all of it. You want backstory on Jyn Erso, this is the book to read. This is really the only book to read. Between this and Catalyst, oh my God, Rebel Rising is such an amazing story. And like I said, it's basically a character just expose on Jyn Erso and explains why she is the way she is in Rogue One. So much fun to read. So I really did enjoy Rebel Rising. It's number 21 on my list. Number 20 on my list is Poe Dameron Freefall by Alex Segura. This is a novel that came out after Rise of Skywalker because I think this book was all damage control. Because of the way Rise of Skywalker was received by some people, I think it wasn't as divisive as The Last Jedi, but it was still divisive. I didn't enjoy Rise of Skywalker, and there were things in it that didn't make sense with other canon stories. We know at the time, we knew at that point when Rise of Skywalker came out, before this book came out, that Poe left somewhere and became a New Republic pilot and then joined the Resistance from there. And in Rise of Skywalker, they made the line, Zori Bliss says, when you left here to go to join the Resistance, skips the New Republic. And I was like, well, maybe they'll fix it in the novel. No, it still says Resistance in the novel. And so I'm like, well, what the hell? What's canon and what's not here? And so I think they came out with this story to basically tell that story of why Zori was so pissed off at Poe Dameron, and why she just put a blaster to her. Because remember in Rise of Skywalker, she says, there's nothing more I want to see than your brain splattered on the snow. And he's like, I've seen you do a lot worse. And she says, for a lot less. She's not wrong in that situation. Poe fully deserved it. When you read this book, you will understand exactly why she was pissed off with Poe. It makes total sense. The first part of it, she's so betrayed. She feels so betrayed because of how close they were and how, I guess there was a little bit of a romantic streak there. Nothing really romantic ever came out of it, but the sexual tension between those two, Jesus, it was just strong. But when you get to the moment where, the moment where it happens, that makes her say, I want you dead, you're just like, oh my God. But you see a lot of how Poe Dameron, you see how his relationship with his mother, Shara Bay, affected him, and how when she died, how it affected him, and how he grew up, how he learned how to do the hyperspace jumping, how he learned how to do the hot wiring and all this. And it basically rewrote a lot. Well, I shouldn't say rewrote, but it filled in a lot of the gaps, is what I'll say, for Poe Dameron. Gaps that weren't there to really be filled until Rise of Skywalker came and made the gaps. But it's an enjoyable read. It's a lot of fun to read, especially when you find out who Zori Bliss's mother is, and you're just like, what? And how, they get along on Kijimi and everything like it. So it's a lot of fun. Definitely worth the read. I definitely think this book was damage control. I don't think it retconned anything, but it was, you can tell that they wrote this to try to fix, saying, oh, no, it's okay. We knew what we were doing. Did you now? Did you really? So it's still a lot of fun to read. It's number 20 on my list out of 56, if that tells you anything. I love Poe Dameron. Very good story. And I'm looking forward to rereading it again. So number 20 is Poe Dameron Freefall. Number 19 is a novel that I was really looking forward to, was not let down by, and it's Resistance Reborn by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a novel that leads right up to episode 9. when we leave the Resistance at the end of episode 8, Leia and the Resistance, they all fit on the Millennium Falcon. That's all that's left, against this tyrannical government that's coming up now. That's all there is. And this book takes place during that year between 8 and 9, and it shows how she's going to these people and asking, we need ships, we need people, and how she's struggling to bring everyone together. And you find out in this book why in The Last Jedi, when they put out the call to everybody to come help, it's now or never, nobody showed up. This book explains why. Basically, the First Order had put a hit out on a lot of the people who were going to come help, and they were either dead or captured already, and that's why nobody came. And they have to kind of rebuild from those ashes. And Nora Wexley comes back in this story with Wedge from Aftermath. Temmin Wexley's obviously there. He's big in the sequel trilogy, at least the first and third parts. And this book does a really good job of kind of showing how the Resistance was formed back up. It's something that I think needed to be shown on screen for a lot of people. But for us canon knights, us canon junkies who read all this anyway, it just makes sense to, it made sense to us after reading, because this came out right before episode 9 did. So I was able to read this before going into episode 9, so it just made sense to me when I was watching 9 and where all these people came from, why they are where they are, and everything like that. So if you take this book, Resistance Reborn, and read it back to back with The Rise of Skywalker, I think you're going to be in for a treat, especially just treating them as one massive book. Like I said, reading them back to back. I think when I get to, because I'm reading trilogies now, right? So I think when I get to the novelizations, I'm just going to sit down and read 7, 8, Resistance Reborn, and then 9. I think that's the way I'm going to go. So really looking forward to rereading it again. Like I said, I was not let down by it. Seeing characters pop up from other mediums was very cool. There's some Inferno Squad mentions in this book. There's some really cool mentions in here, especially for people who really keep up on other canon material. There's a little bit of payoff in this book, a lot of payoff in the novelization for Rise of Skywalker. So if you read them, like I said, read them back to back. So Resistance Reborn is number 19 on my list. Number 18 is one that came out, I think, back in 2016. I want to say 2016. Ahsoka by E.K. Johnston. This is a little standalone novel about Ahsoka. It takes place about a year after Revenge of the Sith. And you got to keep in mind, this book came out before the last season of Clone Wars was ever even thought. Well, I shouldn't say thought of, but in the works. This book's got some flashbacks to Ahsoka's experience with Order 66. It was the first time we'd seen it then. And it's kind of her moving from place to place, trying to hide her abilities, kind of like Kanan was, having to get up and leave in the middle of the night when the Inquisitors start to find out, where she is, or what she is, I should say. And it's a very interesting little story. Like I said, the flashbacks are, I don't want to say they're retconned, but I guess they kind of are. Some of the flashbacks in Ahsoka, not the whole novel. I'm not going to, the novel is still canon, but some of the flashbacks I think have been retconned a little bit, and it's just little details. It's nothing, galaxy breaking or anything like that, world breaking. Colors of lightsabers were still green and yellow in the book, which they changed to blue in Clone Wars, and some of the details of, her experience with Order 66 are a little bit different. Not that big, but there's a couple of there where you're just like, that doesn't quite line up. Some of it is vague enough where you're like, okay, well, I guess that could line up if you just don't think about this. But the story itself for Ahsoka was very, very good story. I really enjoyed it a lot. I buzzed through it very quickly. It was the first book to talk about the Kyber crystal color changes and how that worked. Turned them into mood rings, basically. That was the book that did it. But overall, very, very interesting story. Very suspenseful story. And for somebody who really hated Ahsoka when she first made her debut in the Clone Wars film back in, 2000 and, you guys might lynch me, 8, I think. I hated Ahsoka. Couldn't stand her. Thought she was just the worst. Anakin can't have an apprentice. What the... I just thought she was the absolute worst Sky Guy. And, she was that character that you grew with as the series went on. I think that's the general consensus for everybody. She's a character that we all grew with. As we grew up, she grew up. And as we watched her learn these experiences and these lessons, it changed her. And we watched her evolve into the character that she is now, into this fan favorite, which is such a testament to her character and to Dave Filoni for coming up with her. And this book just adds to it. Like I said earlier, you just want to sprinkle a little bit of salt on top of your food, a little bit of extra for Ahsoka. This right here will enhance your idea of Ahsoka. So definitely worth checking out. And I definitely think it's going to be essential reading before the Ahsoka series comes out. And this isn't the only book I'm going to say that to moving forward. So Ahsoka is number 18 on my list. Number 17 is one I mentioned earlier. It's Catalyst, a Rogue One novel by James Luceno. Catalyst is the opening crawl to Rogue One. That's the best way to describe it. It came out just a few weeks before Rogue One did, and I got my hands on it, was able to read it before going and seeing Rogue One for the first time, which I think really enhanced my experience in the theater for Rogue One. Obviously, if you've seen Rogue One now, you can't go back and read this first and then watch Rogue One, but you can read it now, and it'll really enhance your experience of Rogue One. When I read this book, I was blown away by some of the little mentions here and there. There was a little mention of Ilum in there where they first started teasing that it might have been Starkiller Base from Force Awakens. You really get to know Lyra as a character, Galen. Jyn Erso's born during this book. The end of the Clone Wars is in this book. And kind of their relationship with Orson Krennic. And how Krennic was kind of manipulating Galen. And Galen didn't even know what he was working on. And when he finally found out, when they run. So this book is just so much fun to read. And like I said, I read this before going into Rogue One. So by the time I was watching Rogue One at the very beginning, most people in the theater, not all, most people in the theater hadn't read the book and had no idea who Lyra was. So when she died at the beginning of the book, it really didn't carry a lot of weight. But for me, who had read Catalyst and had grown to know these characters and saw how they interacted with each other and their relationships with each other and how much her and Galo actually fought, because Lyra saw what was going on with Galen and with Krennic and tried to tell him, and he just didn't want to hear it. Galen didn't want to hear it. And so when you finally see them on screen together, it was like, oh my God, I know these characters. They just jumped right off the pages. And it's just a continuation of that. And so when Lyra died, it hit me a little bit harder than I thought it was going to. And I didn't see it. I didn't know Lyra was going to die. And it hit a little bit harder because, like I said, I knew those characters. If you love Rogue One, definitely you owe it to yourself to read this book. This is such an awesome addition, I guess you could say. I don't want to say addition because it came out before Rogue One. Companion, that's what I'll say. This is an awesome companion novel to Rogue One. I think if you're going to read if you had to choose one Rogue One novel to read to go with Rogue One, it would be this one. It complements the movie so well. Between Catalyst, Tarkin, Rebel Rising, and Rogue One, it's just like one massive story arc that you can just sit there and just read all of them back to back and just plug it right into the timeline where it goes, and you get the entire story beginning to end with them, and it's just a lot of fun. So Catalyst, and this is the only Star Wars novel Kirsty has read. She listened to the audiobook for it. I got to watch Rogue One before she did by, I think, like 2 weeks, a week and a half, something like that. And so she had a family emergency. She had to go back to Ohio like the day Rogue One came out. We had tickets to go see it, and those tickets went wasted. And then after she left, it was a death in the family back home in Ohio. And so I couldn't get off work to go, but she went. And so I stayed home. And then while she was on her way up there, I was like, hey, do you care if I go watch Rogue One? And she was like, I don't care. So I went and saw Rogue One with another friend of ours. And when I told Kirsty, no, you're going to have to read Catalyst before you see Rogue One. So she bought the audiobook and listened to it on the way back from Ohio and got it under her belt before I took her to see Rogue One. So she had the same experience I did, knowing these characters. She actually gasped when Lyra died when she saw Lyra die for the first time. And so that was kind of the reaction I wanted out of her anyway, to know that she really did care for these characters. So that should tell you how much this book complements Rogue One. And I think it's essential reading for Rogue One. So that's what I'll say about it. Moving on. Number 16 on my list is Tarkin by James Luceno. This is another one that I just reread recently. There's a couple of little discrepancies in this book now that the Bad Batch is out. Nothing serious. It's nothing big at all, but it has to do with like conscripted soldiers. There is a little discrepancy with the uniforms. Like in this book, Tarkin's trying to come up with a new uniform that he's wearing 5 years earlier in Bad Batch. Like, it's just little things like that that don't really line up a whole lot. However, this was the second book that came out in the new canon back in 2014. I think it was like November of 2014, if I'm not mistaken. But this is a really cool book. This is a good backstory on Tarkin. This is kind of where he came from, why he is the way he is, why he's so cold, his upbringing, it's just every summer growing up, he spent it out in the wilderness with his uncle and a bunch of his drunken buddies, just surviving this plateau, surviving being attacked by deadly animals. And there were guys on their crew dying because, it was just brutal. And it really goes to show why he is the way he is. And not only does it give a good backstory on Tarkin, but there's a good story to it in the present day of the book, which is just a few years after Episode 3. And it's Tarkin's ship, the Carry-On Spike, which is the experimental ship from Clone Wars and the Christophsis arc. The cloaking ship, it gets stolen by a bunch of hijackers, and Tarkin and Vader go on this big hunt to chase it down and to hunt it down. Really cool story. It's awesome seeing Tarkin and Vader kind of interact with each other, and James Luceno gets the dialogue. Like, he gets it. Tarkin was a really cool story, and like I said, gives a really good background into Tarkin himself. And Tarkin was number 16. Moving on, number 15. We're getting there, guys. Is Dooku Jedi Lost by Kevin Scott. This one, like Afra, started as an audio drama, and they ended up doing a hardback edition of it, like a novel, and or not like a novel, but like a script that you could put on your shelf. And that's what I ended up reading of this. I couldn't listen to the audio drama at the time. I just sat down and read the book. Very cool story, though. I definitely want to go back and listen to the audio drama again. This picks up well before the Phantom Menace. Way, way, way before Phantom Menace. You know what? Honestly, with how old Dooku was, damn close to the High Republic. Close. Not quite, but close. It shows how Dooku joined the Order, how he found out about his family, who his family was. He found out, how he was given up to the Jedi Order, and it's kind of BS the way his family just kind of dumped him, basically. You see these stories of children getting left on doorsteps, at churches, and nuns coming out and getting them. Basically, that's what happened with him and the Jedi. His family didn't want anything to do with him because of it and whatnot. So it kind of explains why he was so jaded. And it explains how he found out, he was the Count of Sereno, where he was from, and his nobility. It talks about how his falling out with the Jedi kind of happened. Kind of, I don't want to say step by step, but a little bit step by step. And kind of his experiences that led up to that, his friendship with Sifo Dyas and his master and everything like that. And eventually his falling out. Now, this entire story is told through holograms and like holodocuments that Asajj Ventress is finding during the Clone Wars. Dooku is tasked Asajj Ventress with finding his sister, who's a main character in his past. And she's trying to go through all these old holodiscs and stuff, try to get information on Dooku to try to find her. And that's how the story is being told. Very cool expose on Count Dooku, especially a character that was kind of enigmatic. You know what I'm saying? He was kind of a mystery. There wasn't a whole lot there about Dooku in canon. There was quite a bit. There was a lot of legend stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of canon stuff. And so this basically bridged that gap, and it was very cool. Seeing him interact with his master, and then it was cool seeing him interact with Qui-Gon when he took Qui-Gon as an apprentice, and kind of their interactions as well, and his interactions with his other apprentice before Qui-Gon. Very cool to see all of that, and it was definitely worth the read for me. The listen, it was kind of hard for me to get to. I'm going to go back and listen to it, but I think you guys need to sit down and listen to this one. It's a very cool extension of Dooku. if you would. So Dooku Jedi Lost by Kevin Scott is number 15 on my list. Number 14 on my list is another one that I just reread recently, Lords of the Sith by Paul Kemp. Lords of the Sith takes place just a few years after Revenge of the Sith, and it's basically Cham Syndulla and the Twi'leks on Ryloth decide they're going to try to assassinate Vader and the Emperor. They're both coming to Ryloth, basically because of the Free Ryloth movement going on. Vader and the Emperor are coming, and they decide that's their opportunity to assassinate them. Vader and the Emperor end up on the planet, and it's Cham Syndulla and his group trying to hunt them down. My favorite thing about this book is the conversations between Vader and Palpatine. Paul Kemp wrote amazing dialogue between them. He got the relationship right between them, the lessons that Palpatine was teaching, Vader's brutality. Remember, this book came out before the Rogue One hallway scene, so this book really focused in on Vader's brutality and how big of a monster he was, and just how he was still trying to purge some of the Anakin Skywalker out of him, but that brutality was still there. Force choking people between starships when he's in his starship and he's force choking somebody else in the next one over. Like, it's just terrifying. At one point, he ejects out of his starship, lands on a cruiser, cuts a hole in it with his lightsaber, jumps through, murders everybody, and then gets on the comm to the bridge and says, "I'm coming for you." And like goes to static. Terrifying. It's utterly terrifying. So Lords of the Sith is a really fun book to read. I've heard some people say they didn't enjoy it a whole lot. I will say this, the first half of the book is more enjoyable than the second half, but I still really enjoyed the second half. And I guess that's kind of a hard thing for some people to understand. Well, if you enjoyed the first half better, that means the second half sucks. No, the second half was still good. I just enjoyed the first half better. It was really cool. It was really cool to see the Emperor and Vader back to back, lightsabers out, the Royal Guard there fighting alongside them. Like, it was absolutely cool. Not to see it, but I mean, in your mind's eye to see it. Very cool and very enjoyable book. I think you guys would really enjoy that one quite a bit. So it's number 14 on my list. Number 13 is The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View. 40 short stories celebrating 40 years of The Empire Strikes Back. This is just like the other one from Star Wars. But like I said, this is The Empire Strikes Back. This one is a lot of fun to read. And this one I enjoyed a lot more than Star Wars. Star Wars had the Cantina. This one had Hoth and Cloud City. This one had a lot of background stories between Hoth and Cloud City. Not unenjoyable stories, good stories, a little repetitive, but not badly. This book's really got me looking forward to, I think, next year. Yeah, next year when we get, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi, which is inevitably going to happen. They better, because my OCD is going to go crazy if I don't have all three of these. This one was a lot of fun, and just like the first one, you don't have to read the stories necessarily in chronological order. If a certain story sounds interesting to you, pick it up and read it. You know, you can skip through, read them completely out of order. It doesn't matter. It's still a lot of fun to read, and like I said, it's basically The Empire Strikes Back. There are a couple of stories in this one that are a little far-fetched compared to the movies. A couple of characters that were okay. So there's parts of Empire that can only be told from two people's point of view, and that's Vader and Luke. When they're in their lightsaber battle, you know, over the big chasm where Vader tells him he's his father. There's only two people there for that. And if you're telling the story from background characters' points of view, it's hard to do that when nobody else was there. So they had to get creative with the way they wrote some of these, and there were characters there. You just didn't see them in the film because they were at a distance, you know what I'm saying? So some of them you got to take with a little bit of a grain of salt, and you're just like, oh, okay, that she was there. She heard him say that. Who are those people? I don't even know who they are over there. There's a guy in a black armor and some boy with one hand yelling. Like, what the hell's going on over there? That's basically one of the stories. So other than that, it's just 40 short stories. It's going to take you a while to buzz through them, but you can sit down and kind of work your way through it. And you don't have to commit to the whole book. But there are, you know what? There's some stories on Hoth that are really enjoyable, though. One of them, oh my God, you find out exactly how tragic the Tauntaun stories are. There's some stories from the point of view of the Tauntauns, and they're absolutely tragic and heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So, because, I mean, remember, one of them got cut open and had Luke shoved inside of it. And there's some seriously messed up stuff with the Tauntauns in there. Worth picking up. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Empire Strikes Back, from a certain point of view, is number 13 on my list. Number 12 is one we mentioned earlier. Also, it is Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. This one was written because of her success with the story Master and Apprentice in Star Wars, from a certain point of view. This is a Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan story set before The Phantom Menace. And honestly, this was a really fun story to read. First off, again, worship at the altar of Claudia Gray. But this particular story showed a dynamic between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon that I wasn't expecting. Because in The Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, I mean, they work together very well. Except for when Obi-Wan's like, why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form? Like, why are we doing this? And when they're arguing on Coruscant, and he's like, if you would just listen to the council, you would be on the council. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you can tell Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were two very different kinds of Jedi. And you see that a lot in this story. It's even a point of contention between the two very early in their relationship, to the point where Obi-Wan is basically like fed up with Qui-Gon and just ready to take on a new master. They end up going on a mission with Dooku's other apprentice that was mentioned in Dooku Jedi Lost. And the story itself was enjoyable. They go to this planet, and there's this young queen. I don't want to call her a queen, but she's basically a queen. But she's not running anything. The Jedi the Dooku's former apprentice is. And he's basically protecting her until she's old enough to take over that responsibility. And there's assassination attempts, and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are trying to get to the bottom of it. Very neat story. By the end of it, it's the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan we all know and love, and the relationship that they've always had. So it's a very interesting book to read. It's got a few slow parts in the middle, but overall, very good book. I want to say this is, if you actually look at Claudia Gray, hang on a second. Let me make sure I'm not going to lie to you guys, because I'm pretty sure I mentioned Claudia Gray earlier, but it was because of, yeah, that's right. Because of From a Certain Point of View. This is my least favorite Claudia Gray novel. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't lying to you guys. This is the one. And it's not that I don't enjoy this book. I still really like it. It's like I said earlier, it's just because it's my least favorite doesn't mean I don't like it. I still really enjoy this book. But of Claudia Gray's works, this is the one that is the bottom of the list. If I'm ranking Claudia Gray, this is the bottom of the list. But still a lot of fun to read. You guys are really going to enjoy this one, especially if you just want to read everything Claudia Gray. You're not going to regret reading this one. I guarantee it. So Master and Apprentice is number 12 on my list. Number 11 on my list, we're going to talk a little bit more about some High Republic stuff. The High Republic young adult novels, which consist of Into the Dark, Out of the Shadows, and coming out next month, it's not even out yet, is Midnight Horizon, which I'm really looking forward to. This trilogy so far focuses a lot more on like the Drengir of the High Republic, the plant creatures that are eating everybody and are spreading through the galaxy. And it follows some of the same characters from the Young Reader trilogy. Not very well, but it's mainly the same characters in this trilogy, but there's a couple of them that cross over. Into the Dark is a really cool one. There's a space platform, like a pirate's platform out in space that has these plants all over it. And the Jedi that's there finds these idols, and they can't figure out what they are. And they remove the idols, take them back to Coruscant, because they end up finding out that these idols are like imbued with the dark side. And they take them back to Coruscant. And on the station, it basically wakes all the Drengir up. And what it is these idols were keeping them idle as just plants. And when they're removed, they end up waking up, become sentient. And it's just all hell basically breaks loose. So, and that's what Out of the Shadows basically follows as well. Very cool trilogy so far. I'm really looking forward to reading Midnight Horizon, and I can't wait to see where this trilogy goes. So far, this trilogy still complements book for book the same way the other trilogy did. This Into the Dark complements Light of the Jedi, Out of the Shadows complements The Rising Storm, and I'm assuming Midnight Horizon is going to complement The Fallen Star. Like I said, looking forward to reading that last one. That trilogy may move depending on how the third book goes. So I'll let you guys know what I think of Midnight Horizon once it comes out. I get my hands on it, get it read. I've got 2 High Republic books I got to read before February, so we'll see if we can get caught up on some of this stuff. But High Republic young adult novels so far are number 11 on my list. Top 10, guys. Here we go. They're all just stellar from here on out. Number 10 is Myths and Fables trilogy by George Mann. This is not technically a trilogy, but they're all the same format of book, so I grouped them together as trilogy. They're all by the same author, and it's just awesome. So Myths and Fables, Dark Legends, and Life Day Treasury are the 3 books in this trilogy so far. There may be more coming. I didn't even know about Life Day Treasury until 2 weeks after it came out, and I just happened to find it on Kindle. I was like, what the hell is this? Oh my God, I need this. Myths and Fables is a collection of short stories. They're basically bedtime stories that you can read to your kid. Star Wars stories. And they're not childish stories. They're like actual legends from the Star Wars universe. Like there's a story of, and they never mention it by name, but we all know that it's Obi-Wan fighting a crate dragon on Tatooine and helping the Sand people. And, you know, there's these different stories. There's one story on Korriban, which we find out it did used to be called Korriban, and then they changed it to Moraban. So Korriban is now canon. And there's a cool Sith story in Myths and Fables. All of the stories in these books are really fun to read. And because it was such a hit, they asked him to come back later the next year and to do Dark Legends, which was a lot of dark stories, not like Myths and Fables, which some of them were kind of lighthearted, a couple of dark ones. But Dark Legends, there's a lot of dark stuff and a lot of Sith stories, Sith alchemy. I mean, there's some really cool stuff in there, stuff you can buzz right through. And it's just, there's a Dathomir witch story in there that is just awesome. And so that one was a lot of fun also. Life Day Treasury was more of a, okay, look, Myths and Fables is bedtime stories. Dark Legends, is more like Halloween. It came out around Halloween anyway. More Halloween-ish stories, creepy, spooky kind of stuff. Life Day Treasury is if you're a Christmas person, which I'm not really a Christmas person like I used to be. But Life Day Treasury is basically a bunch of Christmas stories in Star Wars. That's really all it is. But all 3 of these together were so enjoyable to sit down and just read the stories. I had so much fun reading them, and I couldn't put it down. I could not put these 3 books down. Even the Life Day Treasury one, I couldn't put down. So these are a lot of fun to have in the collection. Whether or not they're fully canon is kind of in the air. I like to say that they are canon because they're basically just legends from the Star Wars galaxy, legends within the galaxy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to assume that they're canon. There's an Inquisitor story in Dark Legends that is really cool. He's stealing kids from an orphanage. Oh God, it's so cool. There's some really cool stuff in there. So the Myths and Fables trilogy is what I call it. That's not the official title for it, but that's just what I'm calling it. By George Mann is number 10 on my list. Number 9 is going to surprise a lot of people. Actually, 9 and 8 are both going to surprise a lot of people because I wasn't a fan of The Rise of Skywalker. But number 9 is The Rise of Skywalker by Ray Carson. The reason I enjoy this novelization so much is there was so much payoff at the end of it for people who actually read all of the canon novels and play all the video games and watch all the TV shows. There was a lot of payoff. And all that payoff was there toward that final battle when everybody, you know, on that Star Wars on your left moment, when everybody showed up. And in the book, you start seeing people throw out call signs. Kaz Kazuto was there from Resistance, and Iden Versio's daughter and Uncle Shiv was there. And I mean, there was all, the Ghost was there. All these other characters from all these other stories in canon popped up, and they were all there. Everybody was there, and that's all canon. They were there. And the fact they didn't put that in the movie is so heartbreaking. But to read the novelization, it really fixed Rise of Skywalker for me. And we'll talk about the next one here in a minute because it's another novelization. There's a point I want to make, but I'll talk about it on the next one. Rise of Skywalker, the novel, really did fix it for me a lot. It's the same thing with The Last Jedi that I told a lot of other people read the novel instead of the book, instead of the movie if you didn't like the movie. Really enjoyed Rise of Skywalker. And like I said earlier, if you read Resistance Reborn and Rise of Skywalker back to back, It's going to be an awesome little duology. Definitely need to be read back to back. So Rise of Skywalker by Ray Carson is number 9 on my list. Number 8 is The Last Jedi by Jason Fry. I'm going to catch so much crap for this. I always do. I know that The Last Jedi was the most divisive Star Wars film ever made. I get it. I get there are people out there that just shit all over that movie. I totally get it. And then on the other side of the coin, there's people out there who swear up and down that is the best GD Star Wars movie they've ever seen. It was just so divisive, all right? Hear me out, okay? Because remember, this is a safe space for opinions, you remember? Everybody's entitled to an opinion here. When The Last Jedi first came out, I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. To this day, I still defend what they did with Luke Skywalker. I really did like The Last Jedi. And everybody just started shitting all over it. And I told everybody, look, this is the second movie in a trilogy. You're not supposed to be happy at the end of a second movie in a trilogy. Wait until the third one comes out, and maybe it'll all make sense. And I apologize because I was wrong. I was wrong. I was totally wrong. I told people during The Last Jedi, though, during that whole finagle, read the novel. I said, even if you didn't like the film, read the novel. It'll fix The Last Jedi for you. And I was told I was crazy. I said, trust me. Just trust, humor me. Go read the novelization for Last Jedi. You're going to love it. I was called crazy. I was called names. They went and read it, and they came back and said, you're totally right. You are absolutely right. The Last Jedi as a novel is absolutely awesome. And one of the biggest reasons behind it is because it really delves into Luke's head, what he's thinking, why he's thinking what he is, why he's saying what he is. Some flashbacks, not a lot, but a little bit of flashback, and a little bit of character building with the kind of life he wanted to have instead of what he ended up getting. So there's a lot more character. Luke's third lesson is in the book, not a deleted scene in the movie. It's actually in the book. But it led me to making a video, because the more I thought about it, the more I was like, God, you know what? I think it did. I made a video titled something like, I don't remember how I worded it. Something like, would the sequel trilogy have been better as books instead of films? And I got a general agreement on that yeah, they would definitely be better as books instead of films. Had they come out and said, look, we're not going to do 7, 8, and 9 as films, but here's the novelizations of them, kind of like what they did with the Heir to the Empire trilogy. They said that's the official continuation of the saga. Had they done that with these books, oh, God, it would have been amazing. We'd have been begging for them to make them movies. I guarantee it. And maybe they would have, and maybe they would have turned out better. But The Last Jedi novel really fixed The Last Jedi. And after Rise of Skywalker came out, and I didn't like it at all, I was in the same boat that people who didn't like Last Jedi were in. I told myself, wait for the novelization to come out. You might like it better. We'll see. We'll just see how it goes. And I did. I liked the novel a lot better than, now I know how the people who didn't like Last Jedi felt when they read the novel for it, after reading Rise of Skywalker. So definitely give it a shot. If you're not I know you guys who hate Last Jedi, I get it. You guys are screaming at me right now. You may have already turned me off. I don't know. But, there are people that passionate about it. I get it. Look, I get why you guys don't like The Last Jedi. I understand. I hear you. I totally see every single thing you guys say is wrong with The Last Jedi. I see it. But I sat back and really tried to appreciate it for what it was. And I enjoyed the film until Rise of Skywalker came out, and I realized this isn't a trilogy at all. It's 3 standalone movies. So I refuse to refer to it as the sequel trilogy. It's the sequel film. So if you want to talk about novels, it's the sequel trilogy, because they really do go well together. And like I said, there's a lot more there, really getting into people's brains and what they were thinking and why they were doing what they were doing. And it's just so much better. The Force bond, not the bond, but like the communication thing between Rey and Kylo is explained a lot better in the novel too. So The Last Jedi is number 8 on my list. I stand by it. If you don't believe me, do me the favor, at least go read the novel. Tell me I'm wrong after that. That's cool. If you don't like the novel after that, that's fine. Thank you for at least humoring me. I appreciate it. So The Last Jedi is number 8 on my list. Number 7 is a trilogy, and it's a trilogy that just finished up. You guys know what it is. It is the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. This was a lot of fun. This trilogy was so much fun to sit and read. Long, but God, it was good. This is not the Thrawn trilogy that happens during like the classic saga. This is the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, made up of Chaos Rising, Greater Good, and Lesser Evil. So this trilogy, the best way I can describe it, this trilogy is, I would consider, advanced Star Wars reading. This is universe building inside of a universe. Thrawn Ascendancy, it follows Thrawn, but it follows him during his time with his own people in their own military. And it really fleshes out the structure of the Chiss and that entire part of the galaxy and how all of these people, all these species see the Chiss and all these different languages and all these different trade routes and different technologies. Because remember, this isn't your Star Wars galaxy. This isn't, you don't have hyperdrive computers and you don't have shields. You have static barriers and Skywalkers. Okay, so the Skywalker thing, it confuses some people. The Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, they don't have hyperspace computers. The Chiss base all of their hyperspace travel off of young girls who are like the age of like 7 to 10, 7 to 12, something like that, who have the ability, it's the Force, we know it's the Force, but they call it third sight, and it kind of fades as they get older, and they use the Force to kind of navigate through hyperspace. That's the Chiss military's navicomputer, basically. So it's an entirely different universe within a universe. They refer to the Star Wars galaxy proper as lesser space. And there's this whole political, like, structure. I mean, Timothy Zahn has really gone out of his way to flesh out the Chiss ascendancy, and everything in the chaos is what they refer to their portion of the galaxy as the chaos. He's done such a good job of introducing these new species, these new characters. The main villain of this trilogy, whose name is Jixtus, is just absolutely awesome trilogy. And like I said, very advanced reading. You have to really know your Star Wars to read this, and you have to be really patient with this, because some of the names, some of the Chiss names, they'll be said once with their full name, like Thrawn's name is Mithranaruru or something like that. I don't even know how to say it. Richard J. would be yelling at me. Mithranaruru or something like that. But it's shortened to Thrawn. So he'll call them by their full name once, and then their shortened name every time after that. But there's so many characters, and the characters are so diverse in this trilogy, and you really see how that part of the galaxy sees the Chiss. You understand why this guy Jixtus is trying to take the Chiss down. He's basically like an Emperor Palpatine kind of S character with the long plan kind of thing. But it's a really great trilogy. Definitely, if you haven't read the first Thrawn trilogy yet, which we're getting ready to talk about, if you haven't read the first Thrawn trilogy yet, don't read it until you've read this one. Read this trilogy first. This one leads into the first Thrawn trilogy that he wrote for canon. And I think it does it's a very good foundation for that trilogy to set on. Even though the first trilogy came out first before this one, I think this trilogy is a really good foundation to set the other one on top of. They all go really well together, and honestly, I would read all 6 books back to back. I would read all 6 back to back as one massive Thrawn story. And I think it would be totally worth it. I think you're going to absolutely adore it. There are mentions of going to lesser space into the actual Star Wars galaxy proper that is just awesome to read. The 2 trilogies cross over at one point very well, I might add. Actually, these 2 trilogies cross over better than any other 2 pieces of Star Wars media in the library. I mean, totally. Very, very cool to see conversations from one side in one trilogy and then to see the same conversation from another side in the other trilogy. Very cool. So the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy by Timothy Zahn, like I said, very advanced reading. Sit down, take your time. Don't rush through it. Take your time through this trilogy and definitely read them back to back. That's all I'm going to say. So Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy is number 7 on my list. Number 6 is the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. This is the first Thrawn trilogy he wrote for canon. It consists of Thrawn, Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn Treason. These 3 books all happen during his time with the Empire. You kind of see how the Empire doesn't like having aliens, especially in the Empire, especially in the command structure. You see the struggles he has to put up with to get to where he is, where we see him in Rebels. Thrawn Alliances crosses over really cool with Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good. Out of these 3 books, Thrawn Treason is my absolute favorite. There's a cool little tie-in with Rogue One on there and with Rebels. But this trilogy in itself really sets Thrawn up, and it crosses over with Rebels a couple times. It really, matter of fact, Thrawn Alliances ends with his first appearance in Rebels. And then there's a part in Rebels, there's like a 4 or 5 episode stretch there where he doesn't pop up at all. That is where Thrawn Treason takes place. So it's really cool to kind of see how it weaves in and out of some other things. Really, really cool stories. But yeah, Thrawn Treason has a lot to do with Rogue One. I shouldn't say Rogue One, but with the Stardust Project, with Orson Krennic, and Galen Erso, and Tarkin's in that one too. And look, if you love Thrawn as a character and you like to see how he just picks everything apart, how he analyzes everything, all 6 of these books, all 6 of them, is just pure Thrawn. Love it. Absolutely adore all of them. The second trilogy really does complement the first really well. And so I didn't even mean to rank them this way, but I'm ranking them in the order you need to read them. I mean, they just get better and better as you go. If that tells you anything, if you start with Thrawn Ascendancy Book 1 and you read that entire trilogy and then start with Thrawn and go all the way to Thrawn Treason, you're in for an awesome ride. You're in for an amazing ride. Don't rush. That's the only thing I can say. Don't rush it. Take your time. Go through it slowly, meticulously, and enjoy it. Soak it all in and just enjoy those 2 trilogies. So number 6 is the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. Number 5, we're going back to the Queen of Star Wars Canon, Claudia Gray, and her book, Leia, Princess of Alderaan. This is a book that came out right before The Last Jedi. It talks a lot about Leia's past when she's 16, her history, her growing up on Alderaan a little bit, her relationship with Bail and Bria, kind of the way she views the world and how she's excited to take on her mother's role and to be the heir to the throne of Alderaan. She meets Amilyn Holdo for the first time, who we see in The Last Jedi. However, she's an entirely different character than what she was in The Last Jedi. Last Jedi, she seemed pretty normal. In this book, she's kind of like a Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. Kind of that kind of crazy, kind of weird, misunderstood kind of girl. You know what I'm saying? Very Luna Lovegoodish is the only way I can describe it. If you know, you know. That's the only way I know how to place her. Leia finds out about her parents' activities with the Rebel Alliance, wants to help. She's only 16. Her parents are like, hell no. Leia starts helping anyway, starts messing some stuff up. And it's her learning how to be a leader, you know, and her time in the Senate and everything like that. Very cool book. Very, very fun to read. It's not confirmed in the book, but there may have been a cameo of the Millennium Falcon. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. No, Han and Chewie aren't actually in it, but there's a mention of a beat up YT-1300 freighter that takes off in front of them. It's kind of a little on the nose thing, but it was kind of cool to read. And the last line of this book is a gut punch. If you read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't think Claudia Gray can make you cry with one line in a book, you are absolutely crazy, because she will punch you in the gut through her book with this final line in it. And like I said, if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. So Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray is number 5. She just gets Leia. She understands the character Leia. She understands what makes Leia Leia. She has really done a good job of taking Princess Leia, picking her apart, figuring out what makes her tick, why she does what she does, and crafting experiences in these books that really show and drive home the point of why she is the way she is. So Leia, Princess of Alderaan, great read, absolutely adored it. Number 5 on my list. So number 4 is Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad by Christy Golden. This is one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time. Yes, there's like 3 more on top of it, but that should tell you how I view the next 3 numbers. Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad is one of my favorite Star Wars novels of all time. It has nothing to do with the first Battlefront book. I adore this book. This book is so awesome. It follows the formation of Inferno Squad, Iden Versio, and her crew, who we know from the Battlefront 2 game. And this is set before the game. If you've played the game, you probably figured that out. But this book places Inferno Squad in kind of an undercover situation where they're trying to get to the bottom of what's left of Saw Gerrera's partisans. It picks up basically with the destruction of the first Death Star, if that tells you where it starts. So they're trying to get undercover with the rest of what's left of Saw Gerrera's partisans. Saw Gerrera is dead at this point. And some of the decisions that Iden Versio has to make in this story are gut-wrenching. Yes, she's a villain. Yes, she's a bad guy. She's an Imperial. But some of the situations she finds herself in and the decisions she has to make are just gut-wrenching. I was glued to this book. I couldn't put it down. Every time I would try to put it down to go do something else for a little while, take a break, I found myself right back at it in just a few minutes, still going. I just couldn't put it down. You guys, if you haven't read this book, this book will make you hate what EA did to Inferno Squad in the game. I'll say that. This is the Inferno Squad that I wanted to see in the game, and I didn't get it. Don't get me wrong, I like the Battlefront 2 campaign, but I wish that they had... I wish we could get more Inferno Squad like this, in this form, like this version of Inferno Squad. Because as it sits, there's no way. Between this and the game, like, this is it. So, adore this book. Definitely go pick this one up. You guys, I swear, I'm recommending this book from the top of the hills. You guys have to read this one. You're going to absolutely love it. I promise you that. Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad is one. It's not essential reading. It doesn't really tie in with anything else in the canon other than Battlefront 2, the game. But it's a Star Wars story that you are going to enjoy every second of. And honestly, if they would never do this, but if they were to come out and say they're going to do a film adaptation of this with Janina Gavankar playing Iden Versio, I'm totally on board. I'll be first in line to go see this movie when it comes out. Absolutely adore it. So number 4 on my list is Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. Number 3 is Claudia Gray, once again, Bloodline. Yes, it used to be number 2. Bloodline used to be number 2 on my list. It has now been bumped down. Bloodline is a political thriller. It takes place about 5 years before The Force Awakens. It's a Leia novel. Again, Claudia Gray writing Leia expertly and just beautifully. This is what's the word I'm looking for? This is the golden age, I guess you could say, of the New Republic in the sequel trilogy era. I'm sorry, in the sequel era. Leia is a senator. She is running for a position called First Senator. Chancellor Mon Mothma has fallen ill. And so they're trying to create a new position, basically Chancellor, without calling it Chancellor. And Leia is running for this position. In the New Republic, there are 2 factions. There's the Populists and the Centralists, basically Republicans and Democrats. Leia is a populist, so basically a Republican. And she is running for this position against her opponent, who, I'm not going to tell you this part. There is a huge spoiler in this book. Huge. That should have been seen on screen. So basically, I'm not going to ruin it for you, I promise. Her political opponent finds out something about her and reveals it. And oh my God, the repercussions are galaxy shattering. And it's just God. I'm sitting here just like word vomiting, stuttering over myself because it's just mind blowing. When I was reading this book and I got to that part, I was just like, oh my God. I was just dumbfounded. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is how this is going down. And it explains a lot about why why Ben ended up turning into Kylo Ren. I mean, it really does have a lot to do with that. And it just, I don't want to tell you what it was. But anyway, it's just this galaxy-shattering moment that made this book all the worthwhile, made it impossible to put down. Leia's reaction to what's going on is so natural compared to what Leia is and who Leia is. And like I said, Claudia Gray just gets Leia. So Bloodline, political thriller, Bloodline is my number 3 novel on my canon list. All right, guys, we're up to the top 2. And I think one of these is going to surprise you and one's not. Number 2 on my list is the High Republic Phase 1 trilogy, which consists of Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott, and we will soon see if The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray keeps it in the number 2 spot. This trilogy is what... I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the trilogy. Light of the Jedi is what kicked off the High Republic era this time last year. We go back, was it 250 years? I think is what they said, 200 years before The Phantom Menace. It's the Jedi in their prime, and they are coming up against this new villain called the Nihil. Nihil, I think is how you pronounce it. They're basically Star Wars Vikings, and you guys know I love Vikings. So to see I shouldn't say a character, a faction like this pop up in Star Wars, God, this is cool. This is so much fun to read. The structure of the Nihil with the storms and the tempests and the eye, like all of it together is just so fascinating to read. And to see the Jedi during a time of prosperity in the Republic with the Chancellor Lina Soh and, you know, and all her great works and everything like that. Awesome to see all this stuff. And it was a great start to this whole era, you know, this whole endeavor that they're doing, the High Republic. Basically, at the beginning of this book, this isn't a spoiler because it's kind of common knowledge at this point, and it's what kicks off everything. There's a great hyperspace disaster. There's a ship that breaks up in hyperspace while it's trying to dodge another ship in hyperspace, which is supposed to be impossible. Breaks apart into thousands of pieces, and all these pieces start to come out of hyperspace and these random points. And start impacting planets and killing off people and populations and cultures. And it's just, they have no idea where they're going to come out at. Like, they don't even know how many there are. They don't even know what happened. Like, it's just this huge emergency, right? Where all the Jedi have to come together. Awesome disaster. The first book, like, as it's counting down the disaster happening, you're just like, oh my God. Oh my God. And it's so cool. It's suspenseful. The way they wrote it, it's so suspenseful. And then you get into The Rising Storm, and it's a follow-up of Light of the Jedi with the Nihil. And this book is... keep in mind, I haven't read the third one yet. This is going to be a 2022 novel. I haven't read it yet. It's going to be the next one I read. As soon as I finish this video, I'm going to start it. But as of now, the way I see it, you might have read it by now, and I might be wrong, but as I'm seeing it now, The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott is like the Empire Strikes Back of this trilogy, where there's an attack. Remember I mentioned earlier with Race to Crash Point Tower? There's an attack, and it's a huge, huge deal, and it's just such a dark moment for the Republic. And one of my favorite characters comes back in this book from the first one. I absolutely adore this character. One of my favorite Jedi of all time, Loden Greatstorm, is in these first 2 books. Adore him. He's a Twi'lek. Absolutely awesome. Martian Rowe as the leader of the Nihil is an awesome villain. He's very dynamic. He's got a lot of depth to him. They've covered his backstory and his history very well concerning his father and how the Nihil work and the resentments there and everything like that. It's just been an absolute delight to read High Republic stuff so far. So I'm really looking forward to reading The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. It's Claudia Gray, so you know it's got to be good, right? And we'll see if it can dethrone what I've got at number 1. So the High Republic Phase 1 trilogy is number 2 on my list. Guys, we are down to the final one, and it is number 1 by Claudia Gray. You guys can say it with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lost Stars. Lost Stars is still my number 1 favorite novel in the canon so far. But, man, it is up against some steep competition. It is, I mean, right now, it's been at the top for, going on 7 years now. Well, I guess just over 6 since it came out in 2015. Lost Stars, okay, I'll tell you about Lost Stars real quick. Lost Stars, before I get into all that. Lost Stars is a novel that came out in 2015, came out the same day as Aftermath, and it wasn't the one that got all the hype, but it should have been. It's a love story between two characters, one in the Empire and one part of the Rebel Alliance. Kind of a Romeo and Juliet kind of situation. But it starts well before the classic trilogy, weaves itself all the way through it, and ends up ending at the Battle of Jakku. Awesome book. I couldn't stop. I was up all night the night I got it, and I read all night until I finished it. I sat in 2 sittings and finished Lost Stars. I could not stop. Absolutely amazing novel. It's not even a Del Rey novel, and it's my number 1 favorite. It's the first book Claudia Gray ever wrote in Star Wars, and it's been the top ever since. This book has been at the top of my list since the day it came out in 2015. So we're looking at what, 6.5 years. Came out in September, so we'll call it 6.5 years. It's been at the very top of my list for 6.5 years. We are getting to a point where there is such good books. I mean, the High Republic novels are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The Thrawn books were so phenomenal. Now, granted, they're a little bit further up the list, but so good. These High Republic books, though, in my opinion, very well could dethrone it. I mean, we're getting to a point now where it's dangerously close. Lost Stars is in very dire danger of being dethroned. And the day it happens, look, I hope it happens. It's not like I don't want Lost Stars to be dethroned. Someday I hope that it is. I hope we get a book that is just as good, if not better than Lost Stars. I'm looking forward to that moment where I can say, guys, we've got one. We've got one better than Lost Stars. But so far, I mean, it's close. It's so close right now. I'm sitting here looking at this list of High Republic books, and it's so close. So, but not quite there yet. We're going to see once we finish this trilogy. I may come back on here in a week and be like, you know what, guys? I'm updating it right now. I might do it. I don't know. But we'll see how The Fallen Star goes. I'm really excited about it. I'm hearing really good things about Fallen Star. But so far, Lost Stars is still number 1. So I don't think that was much of a shock to anybody. Because like I said, 6 years running, it's still the queen. Claudia Gray is the queen, and I'm hoping to get her on here one of these days. So if you guys would like to see her on, tweet at her, something. I would love to have her on to talk about Lost Stars and all of her books. You know what I mean? I just love to have her on, pick her brain for a little while. But anyway, there it is, guys. We have gone through the entire canon novel library again in order. That's the new updated ranking list. If you guys agree with it, cool. If you disagree with it, let me know where you disagree. What's your top 5 novels? I mean, is your list completely backwards from mine? I can't imagine Lost Stars being at the very bottom, but keep it civil is what I'm asking. And don't look, like I said earlier, we value everybody's opinions here, but don't be the guy that comes on saying, oh, everything in the new canon sucks. Okay, well, in order to be able to say everything in the new canon sucks, you had to have watched, read, and played everything basically in the new canon. And if everything has sucked so far, why are you still spending time on it? And why are you still spending money on it? You know what I'm saying? Like, if everything so far has sucked. I mean, look, we just went over, 56 places for novels? 52. If you haven't found a book by now, why are you still reading them? You know, so don't be the guy coming on saying everything in the new canon sucks. We get it. There's people out there that just don't like the fact that Disney makes canon and it makes Star Wars. I get it. That's fine. But like I said, keep it civil. Don't put other people down because they do enjoy it. Just don't be that guy. I don't like seeing guys like that on here, or anybody putting anybody else down for their opinion. You know, I hope some of you guys disagree with me. Because like I said earlier, what do we have to talk about if we agree about everything? So anyway, that'll do it, guys. Usually I do some mailbag questions on the episode, but because this is the returning episode, and we've been going for almost 3 hours already, I'm not going to do any mailbag this week, but next week I'm going to be doing some mailbag questions. You guys can send those in to Star Wars Canon Podcast at gmail.com. I'll go through and pick out 5 or 6 of them. And next week we're going to be talking a lot about news. I do want to talk about the Lego Star Wars game that's coming out in April. Hopefully Usef is going to be feeling a little bit better. He can join me. He's down with COVID right now. So hopefully he'll be feeling good next week, or maybe the week after. Maybe he'll be able to join us and talk about some Book of Boba Fett, or some Lego Star Wars something. So we'll see what he's reading. I know he's still reading through a bunch of novels for the first time. We'll see what he's reading. But anyway, guys, keep an eye out for some reaction videos coming this weekend. Early next week, we're going to be sitting down and watching Book of Boba Fett. We're going to be reacting, putting partial reactions up on YouTube, full reactions up on the Patreon. And we'll get all those links put in the description of this podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm really glad to be back on the mic. Like I said, this is a stress relief for me. Feel a lot better sitting here talking to you guys about the one thing we all know and love, the one thing we all have in common. So until next time, guys, this is Brian signing off, and may the Force be with you guys.